Chapter 1099. Fog Capital. Ning Kaichen stood in the presidential suite on the top floor of the hotel. Below her was the brightly lit city. The current fog capital was no longer worthy of its name. There wasn't even smog, and one couldn't even fill their stomachs. How could it be called fog capital? However, as one of the world's largest financial centers and a famous tourist destination, Fog Capital attracted a large number of outsiders. This was one of Ning Kaichen's goals this time. Francesco, a member of the European Space Center, had been working in Kulu, where the European Space Center was located. It was a small city with a population of 100,000. If she appeared there, she would definitely be exposed. After all, it was too small, and if she suddenly went there, people would definitely notice her. Even if she didn't expose herself this time, she would still appear in the eyes of some people. He was like the most eye-catching firefly in the dark night. Next time, and the next time, she would definitely be found. Fog Capital was different. It was normal for her to appear here. Scientists, celebrities, models, businessmen, ordinary people, beggars, no matter who they were, it was normal to appear here. A city with a large population and a large flow of people was her best protection. After a while, Ning Kaichen changed into black clothes. She always felt that she had to wear black clothes for work at night. Looking in the mirror, Ning Kaichen clutched her chest and was dazzled. She felt that if she were a man, she would definitely fall in love with her. The person in the mirror was beautiful no matter what kind of clothes she wore. Sure enough, clothes had to be complimented by people. Only ugly people would be complimented by clothes. After admiring the beauty in the mirror for a while, Ning Kaichen opened the window and waved her hand. A long sword automatically landed in her hand and trembled slightly, expressing something. Go up and tie it. Ning Kaichen tied a rope to the hilt of the sword. With a thought, Green Bead soared into the air. After a while, Green Bead returned to Ning Kaichen's side and asked her to untie the broken rope from the hilt of the sword so that it could not reach it. Ning Kaichen put the sword on her back and put her hands on the thin rope outside the window. With a tap of her feet, she rose a few meters. Then, with a tap of the wall, her body swung outward and rose another few meters. In a few moments, she reached the top of the building. She then asked Green Bead to tie another coil of rope to the top of another building. After a while, Ning Kaichen's figure appeared above a hotel on a street. She gently slid down 3 floors along the rope and landed in front of a window. Through the moonlight and the streetlights, she could see that there seemed to be someone sleeping on the bed. After gently opening the window, Ning Kaichen landed in the room and put the rope to one side. Perhaps it was because of the cold air brought in by the sudden opening of the window, but the person on the bed shivered. As soon as he opened his eyes, Ning Kaichen covered his face with one hand and pressed the syringe into his neck with the other. After looking at the man's appearance, she confirmed that he was the person she was looking for. A few minutes later, Ning Kaichen carried the unconscious man back the way she came, stopping from time to time to retract the rope. Then, he landed on the ground between 2 buildings in the middle of the 2 hotels. He casually threw the man on the ground and returned to the hotel in midair. Less than 2 minutes after she left, 2 people came to the alley and carried the man into the car at the entrance of the alley before leaving. Both parties were already very familiar with this process, and they did not question each other at all. The next morning, Ning Kaichen was drinking coffee and watching the news. It was all about her celebrity identity. She enjoyed being worshipped, admired, and chased by others. Her every move would attract the attention of countless people. Many celebrities felt that they had no privacy and did not want too much attention, but she was different. She enjoyed the feeling of being the center of attention. Nothing in the world could be more beautiful than this. If anything, it would be an electric shock. For the next 2 days, Ning Kaichen continued her journey in the fog capital. 2 days later, Ning Kaichen was ready to go to Bali. There were 2 targets there, both of which were people from the European Space Center. However, as soon as she left the hotel, she was suddenly stopped by someone. "Madam Ning, you are now suspected of being involved in a number of kidnapping cases. Please come with me to the police station." The man directly revealed his identity. He was from the Criminal Department of Scotland Yard and had an arrest warrant in his hand. "What did you get wrong? Do you know who she is? You're saying she's involved in a kidnapping case? I've never heard of such a ridiculous statement. Are you sure what you're saying is true? I want you to apologize to us and get out of the way." Ning Caichen's assistant was like an angry hen with a face full of disbelief. "Well, I repeat, you are under arrest. Madam Ning, of course I know who you are, but your identity is not your talisman." The attitude of the police was not too harsh. After all, Ning Caichen's identity was special. As one of the most famous Chinese celebrities, she had a wide influence in half the world. Once the news of her arrest spread, it would definitely cause an uproar. This was already predictable. Therefore, even if it was an arrest, they wouldn't be too rough. Otherwise, they would easily get into big trouble. Ning Caichen looked at the other party and listened to her assistant's scolding. Her gaze swept to a place not far away. There were a few police cars parked there, and the people in them were nervously watching. Further away, there seemed to be people on standby. The feeling of being locked on by the corner of the building. Was there a sniper? The other party was really making a big fuss. Even if she was an earth-will expert, it would be difficult for her to escape under such circumstances. She might be able to do it, but she wouldn't do it. She was Ning Caichen, the most influential celebrity in China. She wasn't ready to give up this identity. "You must have made a mistake. I'm innocent, but I can go back with you." "Of course, I will file a complaint later," Ning Caichen said calmly. The other party didn't know, but Ning Caichen knew what kind of power and strength he had behind him. She wasn't worried about whether she could get out or not. She was a little puzzled as to why the other party had found her and when she had been targeted. However, she had a premonition that this would happen sooner or later, and it wouldn't be too long. This time, Xiao Prince Consort was in a hurry. Unlike before, when he had chosen scientists of all kinds who weren't very famous, there weren't many similarities. These people were all experts in the aerospace industry. They were well known and highly valued in various countries. There were also a lot of them. Someone would definitely notice. As a result, she was more careful than before. She didn't expect to be targeted so quickly. However, what surprised her even more was that she was quickly transferred to a detention center after being arrested. The other party's motive didn't seem simple. She was transferred underground, and it would be troublesome for Green Bead to break in. Needless to say, Ning Caichen's arrest caused a huge uproar in China. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs immediately made a tough statement. When Ren Baqian returned to Earth, he also heard this extremely surprising news. Calm. Miao Shu Wu. Chapter 1100. Where is she now? In fact, Ren Baqian didn't know whether to call her or him. Fortunately, others couldn't tell. Fortunately, the Chinese language was broad and profound. Otherwise, he would have been in a dilemma. She's not in the detention center. Scotland Yard has rejected requests for visits and bail. Even a lawyer can't see her. Our Foreign Affairs Department has already condemned them, but the other party's attitude is very firm. They have direct evidence and are likely to be true. Moreover, after the incident, the United States sent an exoskeleton unit to England for a joint exercise. This incident may be related to the United States. Ding Jia was very worried, but he didn't lose his composure. He had been pursuing Ning Caichen for many years and still hadn't gotten married. Fortunately, he had a son. Otherwise, he would have become the sinner of his family. What did the nation say? Ren Baqian asked calmly. The nation knew Ning Caichen's identity very well. She was listed by some people, and it even involved Ren Baqian himself. In addition to condemning her, they suspended several commercial agreements, increased their efforts in Africa, and increased their support for several countries, Ding Jia said. Ren Baqian nodded slightly. Judging from the actions of the higher-ups, there wasn't much of a problem. After all, Ning Caichen's capture was unexpected. She was transferred to another place to be guarded, and the United States mechanical troops happened to be conducting an exercise. The other party's actions made him feel that Ning Caichen wasn't their only target. As a result, he was afraid that there would be problems with the higher-ups. Judging from the reaction of the nation, there wouldn't be any problems, but they shouldn't be big. This couldn't be better. After all, this was his base camp, and he didn't want anything to go wrong at this time. After confirming that there weren't any problems, the rest was easier to handle. Make the arrangements. Zixiao and I will go to the fog capital in 10 days, Ren Baqian ordered. No matter what, the other party's plans were based on their imagination of power, which they knew nothing about. Boss, what are you going to do? Ding Jia was shocked. Although he was worried about Ning Caichen, he didn't want his boss to be in danger. His boss was still a wanted criminal. As long as he left China, there would probably be many people who would come after him. Furthermore, if one thought about it more deeply, this might be their goal as well. I want to travel. Make the arrangements, no need to say more. Ren Baqian thought about it and felt that Lin Chaola and Xianzhe weren't really necessary. Although Lin Chaola and Xianzhe's abilities weren't bad, and they were good for the decapitation tactic, he wasn't prepared to make such a big fuss this time. In other situations, the two of them were much weaker. Just him and the Empress were enough. As for whether it was appropriate to bring his wife out when something happened. Of course it was appropriate. Within a day, Ren Baqian received a call from Yang Senator. Although he was still in charge of the Messier 87 department, his status was much higher than before, and his rank had also been raised. It was only because he had dealt with him a lot that the higher-ups didn't want to replace him. That was why he had been sitting in that position all this time. To be honest, he had succeeded because of himself, and he had also failed because of himself. He had been restricted there. The higher-ups are exerting their strength. Don't be anxious, Yang Xin said immediately. It would be a lie to say that she wasn't envious of the bald man. His appearance hadn't changed much over the years. However, he also knew that he wouldn't be able to survive. Although he could come into contact with more cultivation techniques and wanted to cultivate, it would be very difficult for him to do so in his current position. Now that he had nothing to do, he practiced as a way to strengthen his body. Now that the nation's research in this area was relatively deep, there would be a greater increase in lifespan only when one reached the Earth rank. Ren Baqian had no chance. I understand, Ren Baqian replied faintly. If you go to the fog capital, it will be very dangerous. Yang Xin expressed his attitude. What do you know? Ren Baqian sensed that Yang Sen was revealing something. They are ready and waiting to invite you into the trap, Yang Sen said bluntly. Of course, they also want to dig out something from the movie star Ning Caichen. Ren Baqian understood that the other party's target was indeed him, but Ning Caichen was also very important to them. Don't worry, I'm just going for a vacation. There won't be any danger. Ren Baqian smiled, and then his tone changed. How did they find out about my relationship with Ning Caichen? Don't treat their intelligence agency as fools. Their nose is sharper than a dog's, Yang Sen pointed out. Previously, Ning Caichen attended Ren Baqian's wedding banquet and went to Wuji City to look for him several times. Not many people knew about this, but it wasn't like no one knew. Besides, those experts in the aerospace industry are all treasures. 11 of them have gone missing recently, which has a huge impact, Yang Sin said. In fact, even some of the higher-ups weren't satisfied with this matter. One had to know that the people on Earth were now complacently looking at the universe. No matter which country's scientists made a breakthrough, the whole world would benefit from it. Without those outstanding scientists, there wouldn't be today's technology on Earth. Every one of them was a treasure in the world. As a result, there were so many famous aerospace scientists who had gone missing in a row. 3 of them were under the age of 40 and had great potential, and they were likely to make great contributions. Under such circumstances, even if Renbochin didn't take advantage of the people around him, it would still cause some people to be disgusted. Hua seems to have gotten fatter recently. The Empress looked at Hua, who was peeling the roof tiles nearby. She didn't know when her chin had become 2 layers, but her cheeks, which originally had baby fat, were now rounder. In addition, her body, which was wider than an ordinary person's, looked very eye-catching. However, the problem was that she hadn't eaten much recently. She ate less than 50 kilograms a day. Her classmates have all lost weight, Renbochin replied. She stole other people's food to eat. Renbochin didn't know what kind of expression to make. He remembered that Hua used to eat with the Empress, and the Empress would eat Hua's food for every meal. It had to be mentioned that Renbochin's status in the family was quite high. In other families, it was the son, daughter, mother, cat, dog, father. In this family, it was the Empress, Renbochin, Hua, pet. The second and third positions were rotated from time to time according to the standard of seeking death and playing around. In any case, Renbochin was still quite full. This could be attributed to him being good at snatching food from the Empress's mouth without getting beaten up. Hua wasn't as good as her father. Later on, Hua learned to be smart and went to the imperial kitchen to get special treatment, but her appetite was only a so-so. Now that she was in kindergarten, Hua inherited the Empress's fine tradition and even surpassed her father. It was unknown whether it was because she had confirmed her position as the leader or because other people's food was exceptionally delicious. In any case, she got half of it. Now, she was the tyrant in the kindergarten. After a few months, she felt that her neck had become shorter. After all, this was his daughter. Looking at Hua, thriving every day, Renbochin's heart was always in pain and happy. This was the complex feeling of being a parent. At night, when Hua returned to Changel Palace to sleep, Renbochin and the Empress returned to Earth, changed their clothes, and went to Fog City. Renbochin's eyebrows were glued to his forehead. They were the kind of sword-like eyebrows that he had been envious of for a long time. When he looked in the mirror, he looked outstanding and unrestrained. This was his own opinion. There's actually no army or police. Renbochin was slightly surprised. He thought that the other party would be ready for battle. After all, he was still carrying a wanted order. Chapter 1101. Today, on the way back from Sanya, he had a 10-hour stopover in Shanghai for a connecting flight. He thought that excluding the check-in time, he would have 8 hours to write his story and take a nap. In the end, there was a delay. Furthermore, when he arrived, he had to wait for 40 minutes for the hotel to pick him up. It took another half an hour to go to the hotel. After eating something, he had to prepare to leave in 4 hours. Tomorrow morning, at 5 o'clock. He reckoned that there was no chance of sleeping. He was working hard to write his story. The worst thing was that he was wearing a singlet and slippers when he alighted from the plane. He was actually taking a high-class flight. Shanghai was only 10 degrees Celsius, and the bone-chilling wind made his clothes messy. His head was already starting to hurt. He reckoned that he would catch a cold. He would work hard to write his story. There would be an update in a while. The gigolo from the Empress's family was a scam this time. Currently typing. Please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 1102. They've arrived. 2 people from China. Target confirmed. Observe closely and don't act rashly. This time, we're acting on our own. Get ready to attack and wait for the target to enter the area. Attack directly. Once again, the target is very dangerous. I've already shown you that video. According to the information, that woman is even more terrifying. According to the standards shown in the video, they won't be able to break through our encirclement. However, we don't know how much their strength has changed over the years. No matter how much they change, they won't be able to escape in the open area. In a certain building somewhere in the fog city, rows of images were floating in the air. Orders were being issued one after another, and countless people were running around inside. Although there were only 2 people, not many people felt that they were making a mountain out of a molehill. The strength of the other party was indeed terrifying, and the value of the other party was worthy of such treatment. LHR Airport was one of the top 10 airports in the world. It could handle about 80 million passengers a year, which was equivalent to more than 200,000 a day. Including the airport staff, it wasn't a small number. Renbochin pondered that the other party didn't want both sides to fight here and blow up the place. After all, there were too many people. If something happened here, the casualties would be too heavy, and they simply couldn't afford it. Even if 100,000 soldiers were killed or injured, they would have to commit seppuku. If 100,000 civilians, tourists, and elites from all walks of life were killed or injured, even their ancestors would have to crawl out of their graves to appease the public. No one dared to do that. The 2 of them walked out of the airport unhurriedly. There was a row of driverless taxis parked outside. Sometimes, computer control was more accurate than human control. With so many cars, the taxis were very fast and orderly. After getting into the taxi, Renbochin spoke the address in Mandarin. A 3-dimensional map of the address, a map of the surroundings, an aerial view, and detailed information appeared on the screen in front of him. He glanced at it and said, "Confirm." The taxi immediately turned away from the flow of traffic. Simple, convenient, and fast. Communicating directly in Mandarin, as long as the Mandarin wasn't too bad, it could be distinguished. Renbochin vaguely remembered that he had a university classmate from Guangdong province. He was so fluent in Mandarin that he had to rely on pen and paper to communicate. If you can understand 2 words put together, consider it my loss. The most amazing thing was that after 4 years in university, his Mandarin had not improved much. This made many people wonder how he had survived alone in S-City for the past few years. This memory was from a long time ago, and it suddenly popped up after seeing this accurate automatic language conversion system. His classmates were already 55 or 56 years old. They were only one step away from enjoying their old age. Time was really a butcher's knife. "Did you bring wine?" the Empress asked. "Yes, I did. Not much, just 5 bottles. Renbochin brought them with him in his carry-on luggage. "Don't ask how he did it anyway." "Where's the AD calcium milk?" the Empress asked again. "Yes, I brought half a box," Renbochin replied immediately. The 2 of them did not even bring a change of clothes, and the suitcase was filled with these things. "I also brought 2 bottles of vinegar. It doesn't taste good here." Renbochin told the Empress all the treasures that he brought. Finally, he said, "You must protect your luggage well when you fight. We are relying on these things to survive. The food here tastes bad, I wonder if there will be vinegar to sell." Renbochin placed his luggage on his knees. With his body size, it was extremely depressing to sit in this kind of car with a suitcase on top of it. However, if he were to place the suitcase at the back of the car, there was an 80% chance that there would be nothing left. The Empress nodded her head in agreement. Her eyes swept across the rearview mirror. The people in the car behind them had concealed themselves very well, but the Empress was very sharp. She already knew that there were people following them. There were 5 cars and about 60 people. One of them was a large passenger car, and the people on it were all armed with live ammunition. The distance from the airport to Foggy City was 20 kilometers. Halfway through the journey, the car made a turn somewhere. The people behind immediately raised their vigilance and were on guard. If the 2 of them jumped out of the car, they would attack immediately. Fortunately, what they were worried about didn't happen. The car successfully entered the encirclement. Suddenly, the many cars behind stopped and blocked the road behind them. This was a spacious area surrounded by plains and hills. The scenery was pretty good, but there wasn't even a forest. This was the most suitable place for an ambush on this road. They were most worried that the other party would enter the city and engage in street fighting with them. Suddenly, a ball of fire exploded on the ground, and the advancing car flew into the air and rolled. They didn't know whether all the cars had crashed into bombs at that time or whether there were landmines buried in the encirclement. In any case, the car suddenly exploded. However, just as the fire lit up, the entire car shed suddenly burst open. Renbachien and the Empress had already disappeared. The target is moving. The target isn't in the car. Search, search. The target is 100 meters above Point East attack. Renbachien was dragged by the Empress and floated in the air like a kite. He was still holding the suitcase in his hand. They saw that the space below, which seemed to be empty, seemed to have been torn apart. Vehicles and soldiers suddenly appeared out of thin air, forming an encirclement with the 2 of them as the center and a radius of 500 meters. Armored vehicles, bunkers, heavy machine guns, and all kinds of new firearms. There were even quite a number of people wearing metal skeletons that exposed most of their bodies and holding 2 heavy machine guns in their hands. Renbachien's eyes lit up. Was this the latest air projection technology? This thing was pretty good. He actually didn't see anything wrong with it previously. When everyone located the 2 of them, they were shocked that they actually stayed in the air. However, when they raised their heads to attack without hesitation, the Empress suddenly pulled Renbachien and crashed down. It was like a comet crashing into Earth. Before the Empress landed, she waved her palm in the air. Immediately, everyone below found it difficult to even stand and panicked. Only those soldiers with exoskeletons could barely stabilize their bodies and attack. However, this little bit of attack didn't cause any trouble for the Empress. Then, there was a loud bang. The Empress crashed straight into the middle of the crowd. Soil and gravel exploded, and even people were sent flying. Many people in the air were hit by the flying gravel and looked like sieves. Oh my God! God! No, impossible. The battle command center in the distance saw the situation earlier than the surrounding troops. A conical pit that was 10 meters deep and 100 meters in diameter appeared in front of them. Everyone couldn't believe their eyes at all. It was completely impossible. They had seen the Earth-class experts in China, and it was completely impossible for them to do this. In fact, according to their calculations, even experts who were more powerful than Earth-class experts would lose their fighting strength after a round of attacks. The scene in front of them was completely out of their expectations. However, before they could give any instructions, the Empress disappeared. Not good. Just as this thought arose in everyone's mind, the scene from just now appeared in another place. The Empress's figure merely swayed a few times, and almost all the soldiers lying in ambush here were annihilated. There were also a few large pits on the ground. Stop! Renbachien's face was deathly pale. He shouted at the Empress and then started to vomit. A few minutes later, there were only a few large pits and a pile of human bodies scattered everywhere. Most of them were still groaning, and a small number of soldiers who weren't within the attack range had already thrown down their weapons and raised their hands in fear. This wasn't something they could resist at all. They weren't human at all. In addition to these, there was also a pile of vomit left at the scene. The two of them had already disappeared. Calm. Miao Shu Wu. Calm. Chapter 1103. It was indeed an unlucky year. He caught a cold and had a fever in Shanghai and had to travel to Shenyang for a few hours to get home. He slept for more than 20 hours and finally recovered. He worked hard to write his story. The pretty boy from the Empress's family had come to life and was writing his story. Please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to get the latest update. Chapter 1104. What's her speed? About 500 meters per second. Her physical strength exceeds the speed of sound. Her physical strength is comparable to that of steel. Her impact has to be at least 500,000 tons to achieve the same effect. If our army were to face her, there's no chance of winning in a complex environment. She's too fast, and her destructive power is at the level of a super heavy artillery. Look here, when she rushed down, she faced the bullet and only protected number 2 behind her. Her reaction speed and dynamic vision can completely capture the trajectory of the bullet and dodge it. Of course, this is inevitable. Without such a reaction speed and dynamic vision, she can't support her high-speed movement. Here, she waved her hand and blocked the bullet without suffering any damage. Her body can withstand the damage of standard weapons, but the upper limit is currently difficult to measure. She blocked it, which means her head is still a weak point. I'm not sure. Just like a child throwing a stone, it won't cause any damage, but ordinary people will also prevent being hit in the head. Somewhere in China, in a huge space, countless people were busy analyzing everything on the screen. From the screen, it could be seen that the sources were a satellite high in the sky and 2 cameras at the scene. Is this the so-called spirit will expert? According to calculations, a spirit will expert shouldn't be this powerful. Unless it's a weapon of mass destruction, it's difficult for conventional weapons to cause fatal damage to the other party. Somewhere in a very simple room. Unfortunately, such a powerful force is not under the control of the country. Such a powerful person has completely surpassed human beings and is not something we can control. There is no power in this world that can balance her. The current situation is not necessarily a bad thing. That's true. I was too greedy. I'll stick to the previous plan. I hope it won't be too big. It's not a bad thing to make a scene. An ambush had turned into a complete defeat. It was as if the enemy had no power to resist at all. Hundreds of troops were completely defeated in just a few seconds. The death toll accounted for 10%, but the injured accounted for 70%. However, what frightened them even more was that the power shown by the Empress was completely irresistible. For the first time, the Rising Sun City knew what kind of trouble it had provoked. It was completely different from what they had thought before. Have you found their location? Found it, they're in Hammersmith. They're too fast. Their target is Buckingham Palace. Quick, notify Buckingham Palace that the Queen needs to leave. Also, inform the Prime Minister. Fog Capital. The command center of this operation was in chaos, especially after the target's intentions were discovered. In fact, the situation was completely out of their control from the very beginning. What happened next was only natural. Especially after the two of them entered the city, they were completely at a loss. They could not think of a way to deal with it. He definitely wouldn't be able to beat him. The ambush circle was set up in advance. Nearly 1,000 elite troops, including a large group of exoskeleton soldiers, only lasted for a few seconds. Now that the other party had entered the city, what should they do? A small army was no match for the enemy. Moreover, if the Hua nation could analyze it, they could also analyze it. Ordinary weapons were completely ineffective. Unless the enemy was confined to a certain area and used large-scale destruction or weapons of mass destruction, it would be possible. However, the results were still uncertain. However, first of all, the opponent's speed was too fast, and it was difficult to limit the opponent's range of movement. Second, they were in the fog capital. For a time, from the Prime Minister to the military to the headquarters, all the departments that knew about this operation were in chaos. The enemy's goal doesn't seem to be Buckingham Palace. The enemy's speed has slowed down. Suddenly, a voice rang out. Show the enemy's situation. The images in the air all turned into two people walking on the side of the road. Their expressions were relaxed and natural, as if nothing had happened just now. However, with their footsteps, all the water pipes on the side of the road exploded, cracks began to appear on the ground and the surface of the buildings, and even the ground was shaking as if there was an earthquake. In the buildings around them, countless people were screaming and running out in panic. They're going to destroy the fog capital. We must stop them. A low and trembling voice rang out. Many people cast their eyes over. Lieutenant General Clare, the commander of this operation, was also one of the famous hawks. This operation was planned by the hawks in the army and the government. It was because of them that things turned out like this. Although everyone present was a soldier, it was inevitable that some people would feel afraid. Some people felt that the enemy couldn't fight, and some people were opposed to this joint operation with the United States. At this moment, hearing his voice, many people turned their gazes over. Their gazes were filled with all sorts of complicated emotions, and the most obvious one was, how do we stop him? Now that the other party had entered the fog capital, how could they stop them? Mobilize a large number of troops in the fog capital? Or bombard the city with missiles? And their targets were just two Chinese people? It's getting a little boring. The Empress and Renbachian walked on a street. With every step they took, the force would spread from their feet to the surroundings. It was chaos in the background. The crowd was screaming in shock, and pedestrians were running around. Let's take a walk. It's rare for us to come out. The last time we traveled abroad. Come to think of it, it was decades ago. Renbachian held the Empress with one hand and his suitcase with the other. I mean, what I'm doing now is very boring. The Empress almost yawned. What she was doing now was like stepping on ants. It might be interesting for Honeysuckle, but she wouldn't do it. She would only eat the ants. For an adult, it was very boring. I'm putting pressure on them so that they can be more tactful. Renbachian actually felt that it was pretty boring, but he still had to do what he was doing now. If they didn't want to see a dilapidated fog capital that was close to being in ruins. In fact, the Empress hadn't really done anything yet. She had only caused a small disturbance. If she really wanted to make it bigger, she could go to a more prosperous place like Oxford Street. The Empress could completely turn that place into ruins in a short period of time. Of course, even if they didn't do this, those people would come forward and think of a way to give in. However, it would drag on a little longer, or some people who didn't know what power was would continue to court death. As for going directly to where the Queen or the Prime Minister was, it wasn't necessary. The effect wouldn't be any better than now. For an old and powerful country, only when they truly saw power and felt pain would they learn to humble themselves and remain in awe. But, how did you do it? Renbachian looked down at the Empress's feet. There was nothing wrong with the area 2 meters in front of them, but there seemed to be an earth dragon twisting behind them. It's just a small trick. Practice more and you'll get better. Do you want to learn? The Empress looked at him. I've told you to practice more. I'm just curious. I didn't see you practicing. This was what Rinpoche found most strange. He would admit that eating, sleeping, and hitting Daodu could increase his strength. However, could skills also increase naturally? The Empress raised her head and said faintly, "I'm practicing in my dreams." Ha! The Empress didn't look good and asked, "Are you doubting me?" "I'm saying that I'm so envious. However, your Majesty is so rare that I can't even be envious." Calm. Miao Shu Wu calm. Chapter 1105. Stop them, no matter what method you use. Don't be too forceful. I don't agree. We're the empire where the sun never sets, and we can't surrender to these two people. We will become the laughingstock of the world. This isn't surrender. And what solution do you have? I request that we deploy snipers. We might be able to kill them. I object. This is playing with fire. The strength of the other party has already proven that they aren't human. We don't need to get into such big trouble. Precisely because of this, we can't let them continue to exist. Their existence is a threat to all the countries. What did the United States say? They want to continue the operation. That's impossible. We can't afford this loss. I agree with Sir Alec. Now that we have reached this point, we should try again. In various offices, the debate continued through the projection communications. Everyone felt their scalps go numb as they looked at the images displayed on the projection. This was the fog capital. If this continued, everyone would be in big trouble. No one could bear this responsibility, including the Prime Minister. All of them would be fired. They would become sinners of the rising sun city. The only debate now was how to stop them. Soon, a preliminary opinion was reached, and the Eagle faction once again gained the upper hand. For decades, the empire had been declining, and too many people wanted to change the current situation and restore its glory. Whether these two people were captured alive or dead, they could give the Eagle faction a chance to regain their glory as long as the laboratory could study the secrets of their strength. Besides, they didn't want these people, who were like nuclear weapons, to exist in China. I'm tired of it. The Empress yawned. Now that the water pipes had burst, the ground and buildings had cracked, and it had happened 30 meters behind the Empress. Otherwise, the chaotic crowd would have made her feel irritated. Currently, the streets were filled with chaotic pedestrians. Many of them were stunned, and many of them were using a small device on their arm to record everything at the scene. They thought that there was an earthquake and ran out in panic, but the slight tremors on the ground would soon stop. However, if someone ran in the direction of Rinpoche and the Empress or looked in that direction, they would find that this earthquake-like tremor was actually limited to a certain range and was constantly moving. It was as if there was a huge creature moving below. I'm hungry. The Empress stopped and turned to look at Rinpoche. All right, let's go eat. Rinpoche laughed. In fact, there were times when the Empress behaved like a child. Of course, it wasn't that she was childish, but that she did as she pleased. Regardless of whether it was on Earth or in Deo, she was well deserved to be at the top of the food chain. There was no reason for her to care about what others thought. She would only be more accommodating to him. They had been married for several years. Including the time they had spent on Earth, they had long passed the 7-year itch. However, there were not many changes in their relationship. They had only become more natural. It was also more natural when he hit people. Rinpoche raised his head and looked around to see if there was any place that seemed to serve good food. Although he had no expectations for the food in this country. For the Chinese, the most famous food in this country should be the stargazy pie, die with regrets. Point 1 is in position. Target detected. Point 2 is in position. Point 3, the Empress realized that someone was staring at her, but she ignored him. Until a gunshot rang out in the distance. The movement of the Empress's arm was almost invisible, and there was a long warhead in her hand. However, this was only the beginning. In an instant, the Empress's arm seemed to disappear. When it reappeared, there were 18 bullets in her hand. The bullets fell to the ground with a crash. Bullets from a sniper rifle. Renbachien looked down and immediately knew what it was. In fact, he had already sensed that he was being targeted. However, with the Empress around, he didn't need to worry. He just needed to focus on finding a place to eat. However, the Empress's face began to turn gloomy. She wanted to eat, but these people were disturbing her. I wanted to let them go first. The Empress's voice was like sub-zero ice, making people shiver. They don't appreciate it. They still don't understand your power. Renbachien took the opportunity to fan the flames and provoke the Empress's anger. This was a subconscious reaction and had nothing to do with one's character. Just take it as it is. In the next second, the Empress dragged Renbachien and disappeared. 2 seconds later, they appeared on the roof of a building. Before the sniper could react, a foot descended from the sky and stepped on his head. Following which, he was turned into minced meat. Even the roof of the building was smashed, and the corpses on it disappeared without a trace. Then, the Empress stepped on the air, grabbed a helicopter that was hovering in the air with one hand, and threw it down to the street below. There were explosions, flames, and a chaotic crowd. Then, a second, a third. 18 snipers were trampled to death, 18 roofs, and 6 helicopters were thrown down. The broken roofs, large chunks of concrete, and helicopters that were thrown down from the sky turned the neighborhood into hell. It was as if they were in the center of a war. Everywhere, there were people fleeing in all directions, screaming and crying. Only then did the Empress feel that she had vented a little bit of her anger. I'm even hungrier now. The Empress decided to continue venting after eating. She had a terrible impression of this place. No matter who it was, they would be surrounded by a swarm of mosquitoes as soon as they got off the plane. Not long after, they were targeted by another swarm of mosquitoes. It was the same to replace the mosquitoes with flies. Is this what you want? Let's talk to them. Looking at the scene on the screen, the bullets that were thrown all over the ground, and the Empress stepping on the air as if she was walking on an invisible staircase. It was as if the gravity of Earth didn't exist on her body. Some people finally knew that they had completely failed this time. What was left was how to talk to the other party. Of course, after trying again, they understood that they would have to pay a higher price. However, they wouldn't be satisfied if they didn't try. In fact, if it wasn't for the lack of time, they would have tried using poison or other methods. However, they were afraid that before they could do anything, Fog City would already be in ruins. Renbachien and the Empress swept through 23 cake shops and ate everything, including butter, cheese, and other raw ingredients. In any case, they didn't reject anything as long as it was sweet. Even though the Empress wasn't full, she wasn't that hungry. Fighting was very exhausting. Even though the Empress wasn't fighting just now, she had consumed a lot of energy. Hi, I'm Luca Mars. I think we can talk. When they entered the 24th cake shop, they saw a blonde man in his 40s who was wearing an exquisite suit. Renbachien raised his eyebrows. He was slightly surprised that the other party would actually wait for him here. However, on second thought, their purpose was so obvious. They had probably sent many people to many cake shops, and this was only one of them. The truth was just as Renbachien thought. Do you want to go out alive or as a corpse? Renbachien merely glanced at him and walked past him. We can let them out. Renbachien was expressionless, but there was some ridicule in his eyes. Aren't you guys thinking too simply? Calm. Wonderful book house. Chapter 1106. Mr. Ren, I think we can have a talk. Luca Malls turned to Renbachien and sounded very sincere. He had no choice but to be sincere. Right now, everyone was worried that they would cause damage to the fog capital. With the strength of that woman, even a little damage would cause tens of billions of losses. This was one of the world's economic centers. Even a little damage would cause hundreds of millions of losses. If serious damage and riots were caused, the losses would be incalculable. Many people were now cursing the ancestors of the Eagle faction. If they hadn't provoked this incident, how could it have caused such a big problem? Of course, they didn't expect that the target wouldn't resort to any other means and would fight them directly. In this era, who would use such a tough, domineering, and merciless approach when facing a country? No matter how deep their foundation was, they wouldn't dare to do so. For a country, no matter how strong an individual was, he or she would be powerless in the face of a national machine. At times, the power of an army was greater than anything else. If a country was ruthless enough to do something, no one could resist. This was true even for Citigroup, which controlled the government. However, this was only true for ordinary people. It was completely ineffective when facing the two of them. The short attack of the Empress and the few streets that she had walked in the fog capital had proved this point perfectly. This kind of strength had completely exceeded their expectations and made them completely unable to resist for a while. In particular, the other party was now in the heart of this country, the fog capital. Instead of rescuing them, they brazenly went to the fog capital, which was also unexpected. In terms of destructive power alone, the Empress's destructive power was enough to make anyone feel terrified. This was the current situation. The entire empire had to make peace with the two of them and give in to them. No matter how humiliating it was, they had to do so because they couldn't afford the consequences. We have some misunderstandings with the two of you. I think there's a time to clear up all misunderstandings. Why don't we both sit down and talk calmly? Both of you must have come to our country this time to do something, right? Maybe we can help, Luca Malls continued. His words directly pointed out the purpose of Renbachien and the Empress's visit. They wanted to use this opportunity to sit down and talk. At this moment, the Empress waved her hand and said, "I want all the cakes." When it came to desserts, the Empress was never picky. She never picked one dessert or didn't want one dessert. Instead, she just bought everything. Yours truly. All mine. Don't disturb me while I'm eating, the Empress said as she found a place to sit down. Her eyes were filled with anticipation. Although Renbachien said that the food here wasn't delicious, the desserts were still pretty good. Renbachien simply sat at another table to avoid disturbing the Empress's eating mood. You can't make the decision, Renbachien replied. He wasn't prepared to let them off easily, nor was he prepared to make peace so easily. Madame Ning also has some other conditions that aren't too excessive. I think I can make some promises. Can I sit down? Luca Mars smiled. The higher-ups had already given him some authority. What he needed to do was to minimize his losses as much as possible within the scope of his authority. If the other party could take out what the higher-ups wanted, he would be willing to pay even more. Moreover, he also believed that the other party would make a wise choice. No matter how strong they were still facing a country. Even if they had grasped the sore spot, it was only temporary. Renbachien grinned. There was an indescribable meaning in his smile. It seemed to be sarcasm, but there was also some other meaning. This kind of smile on this fierce face was exceptionally uncomfortable. Luca Mars also knew what the other party meant. It was indeed humiliating for a country, one of the most powerful in the world, to actually give in to an individual. Furthermore, the other party had the right to be proud. However, this wasn't important at this moment. I can sell you some things, Renbachien said with an indescribable smile. Luca Mars was shocked when he heard this. Then, he was overjoyed. He didn't expect this to be the first thing the other party said. Could it be that he had gained more this time? If he could really get what the country wanted from Rinpoche, it would be worth it no matter what the other party wanted. He didn't doubt that Rinpoche had something important in his hands. By now, he had already found out that the martial arts of China were likely to originate from him. Furthermore, he knew a thing or two about the strength of the experts in China. They couldn't be compared to that woman. It was like the difference between an ant and an elephant. It could be seen that the other party had the most precious thing in his hands, enough to make anyone and any country drool. However, he still had some doubts in his heart. Why did the other party skip this conflict and directly talk about a deal? Normal people wouldn't talk like this. There seemed to be something wrong here. As I said before, we have a little misunderstanding, but this isn't important. We can completely compensate you, Mr. Ren. Since Mr. Ren has other ideas, that couldn't be better. Please speak. How much is that building worth? Rinpoche suddenly raised his hand and pointed to a building in the distance. Although the building wasn't a landmark, it was the tallest building that could be seen from this angle. Luca Mars knew which building Rinpoche was talking about at a glance. He was a little confused, but he still said, the HSYY building, 37 stories high, covers an area of. The current market price is about £180 million. How about I sell it to you? It only costs 150 million, Rinpoche said. Luca Mars was slightly stunned. Didn't that building belong to the HSYY insurance company? He thought that the other party wanted to buy it. Rinpoche calmly explained, that building, including the company and employees in it, is worth far more than 180 million, right? If that building suddenly collapses, I'm afraid the loss will be far more than that. Why don't you buy it? I can guarantee that the building will be fine. You will spend less money and save a lot of losses. This can be considered the best of both worlds. Isn't it a good deal? Luca Mars's pupils shrank, and his eyes widened in shock. Was the other party threatening him? Or was it a blatant threat? It was like someone telling you that your house was worth 1 million. If you paid 500,000, I wouldn't blow your house up. Furthermore, the target of the threat was a country. The other party was simply too daring. Luca Mars's expression changed a few times, and he forced a smile. Mr. Ren, we are very sincere. I am also very sincere. Rinpoche smiled to show that he was very kind and sincere in making a deal with the other party. The foggy city is very big and there are many buildings. It's too troublesome to trade one by one. Can we change the method and trade a street? Or a district? If you want, we can trade the entire foggy city. We can even expand to the whole of the rising sun city. Calm. Miao Shu Wu. Chapter 1107. The conversation between the two of them was completely exposed to many people. At this time, in the office at the back, more than one person was cursing and smashing whatever they could get their hands on. These damn people from China were simply unscrupulous. This time, Luca Mars couldn't laugh at all. He stared at the man in front of him, trying to figure out what he was thinking. However, all he saw was a contemptuous and sarcastic smile. Mr. Ren, you are very humorous, but we still want to have a good talk. This is the rising sun city, the fog capital, and we are one of the most powerful countries in the world with great power. It is undeniable that you are very powerful, but this doesn't mean that you can do anything unscrupulously. Rinpoche looked at him with a smile on his face. That's why I said you can't make the decision. Or can we talk to your queen? Or the prime minister? I don't know much about your country and don't know who has more say. Do you have any good suggestions? Luca Mall's face turned green as he cursed in his heart. The earplug in his left ear kept sending instructions to the people behind him. Everyone who was paying attention to this conversation was furious. This damn person from China was simply too crazy and unreasonable. Did he really think that he was invincible? If it were someone else, they would have shown him their strength. However, they still had to suppress their anger. The current situation was that they had to talk and appease the other party and couldn't just break up with him. I think I can be a representative and make some promises. Why don't you listen to our conditions? Not interested. Renbochin spread his hands and didn't look like he was going to make peace. In any case, he was here to cause trouble. Although the Empress was powerful in the past, she couldn't be reckless. Now, she was completely unscrupulous. If she had the ability, she could throw missiles and nuclear bombs at the fog capital. Other than that, there was no threat at all. Furthermore, he could return to Dayo at any time and come again in half a month. Don't you care about Madame Ning's safety at all? At this time, Luca Malls wasn't the only one talking to Renbochin. There were many people behind him who were analyzing the situation. There were experts in China, psychology, and many other think tanks. After all, this was a nation that could mobilize large amounts of resources at any time. At this moment, a group of people was analyzing his expressions and words to analyze his character, thoughts, and other aspects. Although Renbochin was very tough at the moment, according to their analysis, his ultimate goal was to negotiate peace. This could be seen from the fact that even though he and the Empress destroyed 5 streets, they didn't cause too much damage or casualties. With the strength they had displayed before, if they wanted to, they could have caused much more damage. It would not be a problem to destroy a building. Therefore, his current toughness was only for the sake of better negotiation in the future. The problem now was how to bring the topic back on track. Renbochin extended a finger and said, "You can only threaten me with one person." Then, he revealed a sinister smile on his face. "And I can use the entire fog capital to threaten you." When he said this, Renbochin thought of a sentence, "All of you are already surrounded by me." That was what he was doing now. In fact, all of you have been kidnapped by the Empress alone. The expressions of the people who were watching through the screen changed. It had to be said that the feeling of a city and a country being threatened by a single person was terrible. Such a joke actually happened to them. Following this, Luca Malls kept trying to bring the topic back on track, but Renbochin was stubborn and didn't buy it at all. When the Empress was almost done eating everything, Renbochin smiled and left the cake shop with the Empress. When Luca Malls chased after them, they had already disappeared. In just a few minutes, they appeared directly in one of the most famous areas of the fog capital, Oxford Street, which attracted tens of millions of tourists every year. Naturally, Renbochin didn't know where this place was. To be honest, he didn't study this country much before coming here. In his opinion, as long as the other party didn't throw a nuclear bomb at his head, he didn't care. If there was really a warrior who dared to throw a nuclear bomb at his head, it would be impossible. Secondly, he and the Empress could leave at any time. Renbochin just felt that this place was more lively. With the appearance of the two of them, everyone in the empire felt like their heads were about to explode. Then, like a moving earth dragon, wherever the two of them went, the ground and buildings trembled. Cracks appeared on the buildings and the ground, water pipes exploded, and glass shattered. It was as if a natural disaster had occurred. Countless people fled from the buildings on both sides, screaming and panicking everywhere. It was like the end of the world. Seeing this scene, everyone in the empire felt their scalps go numb. This was really like a walking natural disaster that was completely unstoppable. The destructive power and threat were too great. At this time, even many of the Eagle faction regretted provoking these two lunatics. Countless emergency communications were sent out from various offices and connected to the other side of the ocean. It's a big deal. An old man sat in his office and looked at everything that was happening on the other side of the ocean. He sighed slightly. This was the power of a super expert. Those guys have given in and want us to help persuade them. We have made concessions in many areas and can talk in detail after persuading them to stop. They can't wait now, an old man said with a smile while drinking tea. This time, we have benefited from it and picked up a bargain. The two of them looked like they were watching a good show. They were only missing melon seeds, watermelon, and drinks. However, it was almost the same now. They were missing fruits, tea, and a pot of wine. Then, they would be the perfect spectators. The damage is greater than I expected. An old man sighed slightly. I thought that such power was temporary, but I didn't expect it to be so effortless. Anyone would have to find a way to stop them. After thinking for a while, he said, "Indeed, we can't go too far. After all, peace is the mainstream. However, it's not easy to take advantage of them. They have to be willing to let go first. Can you contact them now?" "I can't. The people from the embassy are already approaching. At most, they can just show their faces and express the country's intentions. As for what they do, it's up to them." The two of them had only walked half a street when countless riot police appeared in front of them. Several men in suits stopped in front of them and said, "Please stop for a moment. The Prime Minister is rushing over and wants to talk to you face to face." At this moment, both the royal family and the Prime Minister couldn't sit still anymore. They had to stop the two of them even if it meant risking their lives to appear in front of them. Renbochin grinned and pulled the Empress. The two of them disappeared again, leaving only Yao Yao's words, "Have you decided to buy this city?" The people from the Empire of the Unsetting Sun saw this scene and frantically searched for the whereabouts of the two of them. In just 10 minutes, the fog capital had lost at least a few billion yuan, causing a huge panic. This time, the panic caused was even more serious than in the west of the fog capital. If they continued to cause trouble, the consequences would be unimaginable. A few minutes later, the two of them appeared in the financial city. There were many banks, stock exchanges, gold markets, and other financial institutions gathered here. Calm. Miao Shu Wu. Chapter 1108. Earthquake. 2 hours ago, I just heard from Alvin that there was an earthquake, and now it's you, but I don't feel anything here. Did you guys participate in the filming of some movie? Lionel stood at the window that overlooked half the block and looked down. The image floating beside him showed a chaotic scene. The fire hydrant on the street was nowhere to be seen, and water columns were spraying high into the sky. The ground was covered with cracks of different sizes, and there were chaotic pedestrians everywhere. Noisy shouts and all kinds of messy sounds were mixed together. There seemed to be a traffic accident not far away, and a few cars had collided. "Okay, I got it. Find an empty place to stay first. Maybe the aftershock affected your place. I'll go find you right away. Keep in touch. I was just talking to a client and didn't notice any shaking. The street here is also very calm." It wasn't completely calm. Although nothing happened, many people ran to the street to look around. Lionel turned off the phone and looked up. A group of flying motorcycles passed in front of his eyes, and a large number of helicopters and flying motorcycles were hovering in the sky in the distance. People from the army and the police station. It seemed that something had happened. Lionel clicked on the projection beside him, and it immediately showed a series of news and pictures. Looks like there was an earthquake. I don't know where it came from, but the aftershock actually affected this place. It seems to be in the west. Lionel glanced at it and thought to himself. Although he was fine here, he still had to go see Alvin. He was scared out of his wits. Lionel put on his coat, said goodbye to his colleagues, and quickly walked out of the office into the elevator. There were already 6 people in the elevator. They were all employees of different companies upstairs, and some of them looked worried. Lionel nodded slightly at them and stood quietly to the side. His gaze stayed on the floors, from the 16th floor to the 6th floor. Then, the elevator suddenly shook violently. The elevator seemed to have hit the outer wall, and then there was a sound of metal rubbing against each other. A woman in the elevator suddenly screamed, and the others also stood unsteadily and exclaimed. Their expressions changed drastically. What happened? The earthquake affected this place. Lionel was also shocked. He hurriedly pressed the buttons for each floor, trying to stop the elevator. If something happened in the elevator, it would be dangerous. Fortunately, nothing major happened. The elevator stopped on the 4th floor, and Lionel rushed out. He almost collided with the crowd that was running out of the office. He then squeezed through the crowd and ran out of the building through the fire escape. As he ran, Lionel could still feel the tremors under his feet. He could even see the cracks on the walls. It wasn't until he ran out of the building that he felt slightly relieved. He was already covered in cold sweat. If he hadn't run out just now, it would have been too dangerous. However, the chaos continued and became more and more intense. Run, the building is collapsing. Someone shouted. Lionel's heart skipped a beat, and he subconsciously ran in a certain direction. The chaotic flow of people made it difficult for him to run fast, and his attention was attracted by a building not far away that was full of cracks. The building was falling apart, and the building was collapsing. Chunks of concrete were falling from the building. Damn it, why can't we use the helicopter? In an office, a woman wearing a badge slammed the table and shouted. Something big must have happened. There has been news of earthquakes in many places, but this isn't an earthquake. The earthquakes happened at the same time and didn't spread gradually. Look at the footage. This chaos is caused by something moving underground. Underground people. Prehistoric monsters. Mutated creatures. This is big news that can shock the world. We have to use the helicopter. I want to use the helicopter more than you do, but unfortunately, martial law has been imposed. You know what this means. The man behind the desk crossed his fingers and looked regretful. We have the right to report. The people have the right to know. Yes, but the air is under martial law. You can go by car. The woman gritted her teeth for a while before turning around and leaving angrily. The man shook his head. He knew that this was big news, but now that the entire Fog City was under air control, there had to be a lot of things that no one knew about. Even if they were reporters, they couldn't report everything. With one hand in his pocket and the other dragging his suitcase, Renbachin turned to look at the collapsing building behind him. I didn't expect there to be shoddy construction here. According to the power used by the Empress, there shouldn't be any buildings that collapsed. This could only mean that there was something wrong with the building itself, and it was detonated by the Empress's power. He didn't know how many casualties there were, but it probably wasn't a small number. The people of the Empire of the Never-Setting Sun were probably going to go crazy. Renbachin didn't stop walking as he pondered. A piece of collapsed concrete drew an arc in the air and went straight for the back of Renbachin's head. When it was about 10 centimeters away, the tip of a spear suddenly pierced through the back of Renbachin's head and then quietly retracted. Lionel, who was not far away, opened his mouth wide and looked lifeless. He wanted to warn the Chinese man in front of him, but what did he see? Was that person an alien? You too, what are you trying to do? Do you know what you have done? A few men in suits jumped down from the flying motorcycles in the air and stopped in front of Renbachin and the Empress. Their faces were distorted and full of anger. Is it illegal to walk a dog? Renbachien and the Empress's indifference was extremely conspicuous in the panicked crowd. The Empress stood there and thought for a while. She turned to look at Renbachien and kicked him out without warning. He knocked down countless pedestrians, and many of them directly spat out blood. When she kicked him, she didn't forget to snatch back the suitcase that Renbachien was dragging. Bastard! The Empress was annoyed. Renbachien was even more annoyed than the Empress. What was going on? Why did she hit him? Was there any justice in this world? He ran back from the corner of the street aggressively and looked at the Empress, who was staring at him angrily. Renbachien suddenly felt that being kicked by his wife wasn't a big deal. Please stop. The ordinary people are innocent, and many people have already shed blood. The Prime Minister is looking for you. Let's have a good talk. The smooth internal fight between the Empress and the Empress just now shocked the men in suits. One of the men spoke with a pleading tone. Many people who knew what was going on were really shocked. The Empress's strength was too outrageous. If they were allowed to go on like this, it could be imagined that after today, there would be countless casualties in the entire fog capital. Chapter 1109. Liang Qing, who was 48 years old, looked like he was in his early 30s at this time. Sitting in the flying car, looking down the window, he could see the chaotic crowd and the cracked ground below. He was thinking about the two people he was going to see in a while. Number 1, the Empress. Number 2, the gate. He had heard of these two people when he was young. At that time, he was still in Shanghai and had just started working. The old man at home only said one sentence: don't provoke them, hide from them. With his family background, he actually had to hide from them. At that time, he was quite unconvinced. Later, when he learned what these two people had done, he was somewhat glad that he was young and aggressive at that time, but he didn't meet them. Otherwise, the unlucky ones would definitely not be them. Two people who regarded human life as worthless grass. If the strength of an Earth-level expert was at the top of the sky, then they were the sky. In this era of technology, no one could match their personal strength. The entire base of the United States was turned upside down by one person, and the other person was even stronger. Inhumanly strong. Looking at the chaos on the streets below, the other party hadn't even made a move yet. It was unknown what means they used to cause such great damage in the city. It was simply a walking nuclear bomb. It was a big killing weapon wherever it was placed. Ambassador, they have stopped. Shall we rush there now? A military officer with a heroic appearance beside him asked after receiving the message from the communicator. Liang Qing softly responded. He had come for this matter. The Rising Sun City admitted defeat, but the other party didn't want to let them go so easily. But it was not a good thing to continue like this. Now that they had stopped, it seemed that they could talk. One person against a country. Liang Qing whispered. The military officer deeply agreed. The military officer of the embassy was also a master, and he had always been a little arrogant. But after seeing what happened today, that arrogance had long disappeared. There was always someone better than you. This sentence was not appropriate. It could be said that there was always someone better than you. There was always someone better than you in the world. Just what he saw now, the masters in the country who had eyes on the top of their heads could not be compared with these two people. They were simply not the same species. Shattering a wall with a punch and shattering a piece of ground with a stomp of a few meters was not impossible, but that was the extent of it. But the other party didn't do anything at all. They just walked past, and there was not a piece of intact space behind them. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes today, he wouldn't have believed that such power existed in the world. The people of the Rising Sun City did not believe it either. Then, he summoned two demon gods over. Harold Belfort looked at the two people in front of him, sitting on the bench as if he was basking in the sun, his face calm and indifferent. The man was in his 30s, bald, and had an ordinary appearance. The two eyebrows on his face were very strange. One was on top, and the other was on the bottom. They were obviously fake. No matter how one looked at it, there was a fierce look on his face. The woman was in her 20s and dressed in red. Her face was very three-dimensional in the eyes of Westerners. Her long and narrow eyes were filled with coldness. When she looked at people, it was as if she was looking at ants. However, their ages could not be determined. 20 to 30 years ago, the two of them already looked like this. After so many years, the man had changed slightly, but the woman was exactly the same as she was 30 years ago. Time did not leave any traces on her body. The two of them sat there. The chaos in the distance and the surrounding agents didn't affect them at all. They didn't care at all. However, in just a short period of time, they had caused tens of billions of dollars of damage to the Fog City and thousands of casualties. The trouble caused by the military was now up to him to clean up this mess. As an old and powerful country, the Rising Sun City not only lost face this time, but also lost everything. The military, the agents, the police, and the armed forces of a country were like babies facing a big man with advanced weapons when faced with them. They might not be invincible, and they might be able to find their weaknesses after some time, but they couldn't be allowed to continue making trouble now. You two, let's have a good talk. Harold Belfort walked in front of the two. It was very dangerous to stand here. The other party could take his life with one hand. However, he also knew that the other party didn't have such a plan. Otherwise, it would be the same no matter where he hid. Ren Bachin glanced at him lightly. Too high. Do you want me to look up and talk to you? Harold Belfort was slightly angry. Did he want him to squat down and talk to him? Ren Bachin really had this intention, even though he knew that the other party wouldn't do that. He had always believed that kind people would be bullied, and a kind horse would be ridden. For example, people like him who stayed at home obediently had people looking for trouble all day long. Once they met, they would break their hands to avoid future trouble. You two, let's find a quiet place to talk. Talk about buying the Fog City. Ren Bachin didn't understand, and his voice was flat. Buying the ruins. There are also 30%, 50%, and 80% new packages. Which package do you want? Everyone was angry, but they still had to suppress it. A flying car landed in the middle of the crowd. The so-called flying car wasn't big and could only seat 3 people, 1 at the front and 2 at the back. There were 6 duct fan-type propellers on top. The sound was low, and it took off and landed vertically. It was electrically powered and had no wings. Its speed was pretty good, reaching more than 200 kilometers per hour. However, those who could afford it didn't like it. The compartment was too small and uncomfortable, far inferior to some commercial helicopters. The only advantage was that it was much easier to take off and land than a helicopter. 3 Chinese men came down from the flying car. The one in front looked to be in his 30s. He had a square face, combed hair, wore glasses, and wore a suit. He first looked at the collapsed building before walking toward them. Mr. Ren, Miss Chi, I'm Liang Qing, the ambassador of our country's embassy in the Rising Sun City. If the two of you encounter any problems here, you can tell me. If I can do it, I will not refuse. Even if I can't do it, I can also ask my country for instructions. Liang Qing walked up to the two of them and first made his position clear. His words were very polite. Thank you. Ren Bachin got up and shook hands with them to show his goodwill. This time, the country did a good job. Liang Cheng's words were also very nice, making it impossible for people to feel bad about him. The Empress looked up at him and said, if the envoys of other countries were as clever as you, even if they were ugly, they wouldn't have been chopped up by me as fertilizer. There was a hint of appreciation in her words. Liang Qing secretly remembered these words, smiled at them, and said, "This isn't the place to talk. Gentlemen, this is not the place to talk. Shall we go somewhere else?" Liang Qing looked at Renbaqian and asked for his opinion. "Okay." Renbaqian stopped and was ready to settle this matter. However, he wanted what he wanted, took what he wanted, and beat up what he wanted. They didn't go to 10 Downing Street or the Military Intelligence Department. Instead, they went directly to the embassy. Renbaqian was embarrassed to tear down the place, probably because he felt that they didn't talk properly later. In the conference room, Renbaqian and the Empress unceremoniously sat at the head of the table. The three parties sat in 3 different directions. Liang Qing was closer to them, but he kept a distance. After all, he was here to help mediate. The 3 parties sat there without saying a word. Renbaqian lowered his head and rested while the Empress was in a daze. "Ahem, there was a misunderstanding today that alarmed the 2 of you." "Ah, misunderstanding." Renbaqian raised his eyelids and sneered. Harold Belfort's expression didn't change. "However, the 2 of you have also caused us huge casualties and losses. So far, the number of casualties has exceeded 1,500, and the direct losses are tens of billions. Do the 2 of you have anything to say?" Harold Belfort continued to speak as he looked at the 2 men. He meant to point out the losses suffered by the Rising Sun City first and then see what conditions Renbaqian and Belfort wanted to propose. "You talk a lot of nonsense." Renbaqian's words made the faces of Harold Belfort and his entourage change. "Tell me, how much of the fog capital do you want?" Renbaqian continued to sneer. "We are very sincere." "I hope the 2 of you will show your sincerity as well," Harold Belfort said. "Bah, did I beg you to negotiate with me?" Renbaqian had a ferocious look on his face as he replied, "I didn't provoke anyone. Just as I got off the plane, I was bombarded with guns and cannons. Now, you want to beg for mercy because you can't win. Why don't you guys eat the shit you shit back?" Liang Cheng's eyebrows did not move, but in his heart, he thought to himself, sure enough, as the rumors say, he is a tyrannical person. But the Rising Sun City also deserved it. If you work for the United States, you have to be prepared to be beaten back. If he was in their shoes, he would also have the same attitude. Let's watch the show first. After all, I'm just a support. Cell phone terminal M. Ad-free new 81. Chapter 11:10. Renbaqian's merciless words made the faces of the people of the Empire of the Unsetting Sun turn red and blue veins pop out. It was unknown how many people smashed their cups. This was especially so for those from the Eagle faction. Hearing the voice coming from the screen, all of their faces contorted, and they wanted nothing more than to tear the person in the screen to shreds. Harold Balfour's hands trembled a little as he lowered his head slightly. Then, he raised his head and looked straight at Renbaqian. "Madame Ning is on her way here and isn't hurt. In view of the impact this misunderstanding has had on the 2 of you, we are willing to offer £5 billion worth of property as compensation for this misunderstanding. After that, no matter what the 2 of you want to do in the Rising Sun City, as long as it is not against the law, we can give the 2 of you the green light. The 2 of you will not be disturbed again." Harold Belfort knew that based on the absolute strength the 2 had displayed, it would be difficult for them to be satisfied with $5 billion. However, this was just a start. As long as the other party was willing to question this number, he could raise this number even higher, which would open a breakthrough point. Otherwise, based on the current situation, it would be very difficult to continue this conversation. As for Ning Kaichin, it would be a lie to say that she was unharmed. However, that didn't matter. As long as they could start peace talks, they could make some concessions in certain aspects and give the other party sufficient compensation. Thinking of this, Harold Balfour also felt depressed. As the Prime Minister of the empire where the sun never set, he actually had to lower his head to a person. No matter how this negotiation went, he would be nailed to the pillar of shame in the future. Fortunately, although the matter had caused a huge ruckus, there were not many people who truly knew the situation. For the next 2 hours, Rinpoche mocked and ridiculed the Prime Minister. After all, it wasn't often that he scolded the Prime Minister. With Liang Cheng's occasional interruptions, the two sides finally entered into peace talks. After all, Rinpoche didn't come here to create trouble. As for the price, Rinpoche didn't care about money at all. He still needed some technological information and talents. Rinpoche was prepared to peel off a layer of skin from the other party. For example, he was very interested in the equipment that could change the environment and hide one's whereabouts. The two sides entered the peace talks, but on the other side of the ocean, a group of people was still busy. In one of the offices, images were floating in the air. Behind each image was a man in a suit or military uniform. The Empire of the Unsetting Sun has made peace with those two people. Withdraw the troops that were sent out to put on a show. You've all seen the specific situation. This kind of strength shouldn't belong to humans. The existence of these two people has already affected the balance and stability of the world. I suggest we give up on capturing them and focus on eliminating them. The army doesn't pose much of a threat to them. If we act rashly and fail to eliminate the enemy, we'll definitely invite trouble for ourselves. Even if we don't do anything, this matter is related to us. There's no way they don't know that we are already enemies. Rather than letting them have the initiative, it's better to take it into our own hands. In reality, the Empire of the Unsetting Sun is holding back. The other party is located in the Fog City, so it's impossible for them to use weapons that can cause great damage. If they appear in Gotham City or Washington Manor, we will be like the Empire where the sun never sets, unable to do anything to them. This is too dangerous. I suggest we launch a surprise attack on their way back. No one will be able to escape from an altitude of 10,000 meters. I suggest using space-based and nuclear weapons. Do you want to start a new war? They are too dangerous. Their existence is a huge threat to the entire world. Since he couldn't obtain them, he had to destroy them. It's just that they rarely appear in front of people. We are powerless in China, but this is an opportunity. As long as they are eliminated, the impact can be eliminated through political means and some economic concessions. Can space-based weapons destroy them? The destructive power is sufficient. Their attack speed is close to the speed of light and can't be avoided. Tens of millions of watts of power can instantly create a temperature of thousands of degrees that can even melt steel. They are in the plane, so we can't attack them immediately. The first thing we can damage is the outer shell of the plane, which gives them a chance to escape. That woman has the ability to move quickly in the air. If we miss, it will be difficult for us to aim at her again. Space-based weapons are mainly used for fixed military installations, not to kill mosquitoes. I suggest using nuclear bombs, which have a greater killing range. We can eliminate them instantly and give them no chance to escape. Seconded. I also agree with this plan. Your Excellency, give the order. For the United States. Under the strong pressure of Rinpoche, the members of the Empire of the Unsetting Sun gradually retreated in terms. More than half of the negotiations were completed in the afternoon. In any case, if you don't agree, we will start fighting. At worst, we will destroy the entire fog capital. If you have the ability, do you want to throw a nuclear bomb at your own head? As long as we want to, the royal family and senior officials of the Empire of the Unsetting Sun won't be able to escape. Unless they hide like a mouse in a place that no one knows, no matter how strong their defense is, it will be useless. At that time, the entire country will collapse. The people of the Empire of the Unsetting Sun felt bitter and indescribable. However, a knife was placed on their necks, and they had no choice but to retreat. In the evening, the negotiated terms included more than 100 scientists, including physics, chemistry, biology, mathematics, materials science, and aeronautics. They were the talents that Rinpoche urgently needed, the backbone and blood of the country, and couldn't be measured with money. In addition, there were dozens of pieces of information on various technologies and some of the latest equipment that was difficult to buy in China. It had to be said that even though the old powerful countries had declined, they still had some heritage. In addition to the scientists, the value of this information and equipment alone was tens of billions of yuan. That night, Rinpoche saw Ning Kaichin. He looked clean, as if he had just changed his clothes before coming here. His expression was also a little tired, and he looked haggard. "Greetings, Your Majesty." "Greetings, Your Highness." Ning Kaichin greeted the two of them. After arriving on Earth, she had completely regarded herself as Rinpoche's subordinate and had nothing to do with Great Xia. "You've worked hard." Rinpoche nodded. "Have you tortured me?" "I haven't slept for many days." "Both of you know that without the green pearl, I'm not much different from an ordinary person and have indeed suffered." Ning Kaichin pursed her lips and smiled. "Fortunately, I wasn't tortured. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to hold on." Ning Kaichin had never been an unyielding character. In essence, she wasn't much different from an ordinary person. The reason why she could hold on for so many days was because she trusted the strength of Rinpoche and the Empress. She knew how big the gap between the experts in this world and those in Deo was. "Tell me about the situation at that time. Although you aren't strong, you shouldn't have been caught so easily, right?" Ning Kaichin recounted the situation at that time. She was caught without any resistance. "After all, I still like my current identity and don't want to give it up." Rinpoche had nothing to say about this. After all, everyone had different pursuits. What Ning Kaichin pursued was this kind of glamorous, eye-catching, and admiring celebrity life. She wouldn't give up easily until the very last step. Fortunately, after this time, no one should dare to have any ideas about me. Ning Kaichin smiled. She already knew what happened just now. Although the incident happened in the Rising Sun City, the other countries would definitely know the whole story. After all, the incident this time was very big. In the future, she would be famous in all the countries. "However, your identity has been exposed. Even if others don't have any ideas about you, it will be difficult for you to do anything." Rinpoche considered whether to transfer more people over. Although the aboriginals under the Empress were strong, they were too reckless and couldn't do the delicate work in this world. Although those spirit wool experts couldn't be transferred over easily, their disciples were quite useful. However, it was impossible to let them go back after bringing them over. Another option was to use the manpower in this world. His martial arts center had now blossomed and borne fruit. Although there were no spirit wool experts, there were still more than 50 earth wool experts, which was not a small force. Furthermore, they were pure earthlings, so it should be easier to use them. Rinpoche thought for a while and made a plan. Then, he would pick some disciples from the martial arts center to work for him. After comforting Ning Kaichin, he let her go back to rest. After all, she was really tired these days. Rinpoche and the Empress stayed in the Rising Sun City for another 2 days. During this time, Rinpoche and Liangqing got to know each other. It could also be said the other way around. During the negotiations, Liangqing privately provided Rinpoche with a lot of information about the advanced technology of the empire. Not only did Rinpoche have a need for it, but the nation also had a need for technology and equipment. Through Rinpoche's help, Liangqing also obtained some extremely urgent things. It could be said that both sides were happy. 2 days later, Renbaqian and the Empress finally embarked on a flight back to Shanghai. This allowed the people of the Rising Sun Empire to breathe a sigh of relief. Although they couldn't wait to skin Renbaqian alive, they could finally be at ease after sending these two fiends away. However, half an hour later, a bright flame exploded over the English Channel, causing many people's expressions to change drastically. Clear the target. There's no possibility of survival under such an attack, and we haven't found any signs of life. Target eliminated. Cell phone terminal M. Ad-free new 81. Chapter 11:11. The Empire of the Unsetting Sun. Harold Belfort was shocked when he received the news. Who did this? After thinking for a moment, it was not necessarily a bad thing if it could be confirmed that the two people were really dead. After all, the Empire had lost a lot of face because of them and had been extorted a lot of resources. What was even more unacceptable was the 100 scientists. If they were really dead, then there would be a lot of wrangling. But even the army could not do anything to those two people. Were they really dead this time? Harold Belfort sat for a long time. His first order was to find out who did it. He did not give such an order. Who was it? Hua Nation. How is this possible? How could this happen? The hands of an old man who had just received the news trembled and the cup fell to the ground. In terms of power, the yield is no less than 10,000 tons. However, no signs of missile launch were detected. Preliminary suspicion is that it was done on the plane, the middle-aged man reported. Are you sure they are dead? No bodies were found. After all, bodies can't be preserved in that kind of explosion. But we have compared the photos in all directions. No one escaped before and after the explosion. Was it done by the Empire of the Unsetting Sun? There is no report yet. But it is very likely. After all, number 1 and number 2 made a big scene in Fog City. It is very likely that the Empire of the Unsetting Sun did this. The old man was silent for a long time. We were careless. What about Ning Kaichin? She came back a day early. Keep an eye on her condition. Yes. Sir, Elder Huang's call, should I answer it? Answer it. An old man appeared in the air and asked as soon as the call was connected, are they on the plane? Confirmed, they are on the plane. Liangqing saw them go up and didn't come down. Are they dead? The old man hesitated for a moment before saying, if they were ordinary people, they would have died. It's hard to say for the two of them. Don't forget that they have the ability to disappear and reappear suddenly. We don't know where the door is and whether they can leave at any time. Even if they had the door with them, it would be difficult for them to survive that kind of explosion, right? Elder Huang said in a low voice. I don't know. Don't forget, we are all ordinary people, but they are not. No one thought that a single person could destroy a city so easily. I thought they would be beheaded. Their power is beyond our understanding. The old man shook his head slightly. The current situation of this matter was still unclear, and further investigation was required. If they really died, the country would suffer a great loss. One had to know that their value was not only in providing cultivation methods, but also in everything that came from that place. If they really died, then this line of connection would be broken, and it was unknown whether there would be a chance to reconnect. What about the dojo? It is a very powerful force, and it is said that there are many secret techniques hidden in the dojo, which are different from the ones we obtained. Apart from that, many people are also eyeing the wealth that he has. Don't move before we confirm that they are dead. I'm afraid some people won't be able to sit still. Suppress it. Anyone who moves at this time is asking for trouble, the old man said in a deep voice. Even in China, not everyone thought the same way. However, their side had always been suppressing the other side. Number 1 and Number 2's powerful strength also made them not dare to act rashly. If those two people really died, there would definitely be people who would not sit still. But now, before the situation was clear, they had to be suppressed. Normally, they would appear every 7 to 21 days. Within 3 months, whoever dares to reach out will be chopped off. As time passed, more information was gathered. The Empire of the Sun Never Sets had arrested 2 knights and a shareholder of the airline. Indeed, as speculated, someone had tampered with the plane, and it seemed to be related to the United States. There were still no signs of life around the English Channel. At that time, there were more than 80 passengers on the plane. Including the 13 flight attendants, all of them died. Dayo. With a twist in the air, 2 people appeared from the sky with a ball of flame. The Empress's entire back was pitch black, and her whole body was bone-chilling. As soon as she appeared, she flew out of the hall with a pitch-black figure in her hand and arrived at the clinic in a flash. "Everyone, come out." The Empress's bone-chilling voice spread throughout the clinic. A soaring murderous intent alarmed more than half of the capital. "Your Majesty." The people who ran out of the clinic in a panic were shocked when they saw the Empress. Most of the Empress's clothes were damaged, and the edges of the damaged clothes were charred as if they had been burned. The Empress's fine black hair also had many burn marks. Zhao Prince Consort, who was being supported by the Empress, had almost no part of his body that was unharmed. He had already fainted, and his breathing was weak. "Your Majesty, what exactly happened? Save him." The Empress's eyes were red, and dark red patterns began to crawl all over her body. "If I can't save him, all of you will die." Even now, the Empress still had lingering fears. If she hadn't sensed the great danger and brought Rinpochean out of the plane, she probably wouldn't have survived that powerful explosion. Damn it, damn it, damn it. They all deserve to die. The Empress's murderous intent was like a sharp sword that left scratches on the ground around her as if it had been slashed by an invisible sword. "Your Majesty, what happened?" One by one, the experts were alarmed by the Empress's aura and appeared in the courtyard of the clinic. They were shocked to see the Empress and Rinpochean being carried in. The Empress glanced at Xianzhi, Tongzhinya, Qinchuan, Tu Wan, Xianhua, Shuiyan, Xiongyaohe, and dozens of Cardinal Heaven-level civil and military officials arrived one after another. All of them looked shocked. The Empress was clearly in the palace, so how could she be so seriously injured? "Follow me to kill people in a few days." The Empress was furious. She had never suffered such a big loss in her life. Her only thought now was to massacre that country. If it wasn't for the fact that Rinpochean couldn't take too many people with him, she would have led the army to kill them and turn the country into ruins. How dare a bunch of ants? Yes, everyone responded. No one dared to anger the Empress now. They were secretly wondering who could have injured the Empress like this. The Empress stood there and couldn't suppress her anger. The patterns on her body almost floated up. With a wave of her hand, all the experts around her were sent flying, and half of the courtyard of the clinic was turned into ruins. "Your Majesty, Zhao Prince Consort's life is not in danger." After the doctor carried Rinpochean in and examined him, someone immediately came to inform the Empress. The Empress stood there coldly without saying a word, and her killing intent didn't ease at all. The doctor who came to inform the Empress broke out in a cold sweat, bowed to the Empress from afar, and hurried back. Many of the experts who were sent flying landed outside the courtyard, looked at each other, and didn't dare to speak again. The Empress's attack just now was just to vent her anger, and no one was injured. However, no one dared to approach her again. They had never seen the Empress so angry before. No one dared to persuade her. The wrath of the Empress would cause blood to flow. After a while, the periphery was surrounded by imperial guards, officials from the Public Order Bureau, and the Department of Inspection. Everyone stood far away and quietly waited for the Empress to speak. Even some of the experts in the capital were alarmed. They stood in the distance and looked over, wanting to know what was going on. It wasn't until dawn that the Empress's killing intent gradually subsided. However, she only restrained it within her body. At this time, she was like a ferocious beast that could explode at any time. Chapter 11-12. Renbochin woke up and felt his body. His internal organs and bones were in pain, but it didn't seem to be a big deal. When he opened his eyes, he saw the Empress standing there with a cold expression. There was a flash of joy in her eyes, but the coldness faded a little. She seemed to have thought of something, and her eyes were suddenly filled with murderous intent. "Your Majesty," Renbochin said softly. Then, he thought about what happened before and asked with an incredulous expression, "Were we blown up?" The Empress didn't say a word, but the murderous intent in her eyes intensified. A scratch appeared on the wall. Following a series of sizzling sounds, scratches appeared on the wall, the floor, and the ceiling. The table, chairs, and shelves were all blown up, and only the place where Renbochin was at wasn't damaged at all. Renbochin was still immersed in his own shock. He had blown up people for half his life, but this time, he was blown up. If it weren't for the Empress's quick reaction and timely protection, he would probably have been turned into a box. F***ck. Renbochin was stunned for a long time before suddenly cursing and jumping out of bed. He then felt as if his body had fallen apart. How dare the people from the empire where the sun never sets? They are simply courting death. Renbochin's fierce-looking face was full of rage. He was almost put into a box. And it wasn't just him, but also the Empress. Both he and the Empress were blown up. "Are you all right, Your Majesty?" Renbochin turned to look at the Empress. He wasn't dead, and with her physical condition, she should be fine. However, he still had to ask her to be at ease. "Follow me back to the palace, recuperate, and then go kill people," the Empress said through gritted teeth. "Let's go." Renbochin jumped down from the bed naked. His clothes were already prepared beside him. However, he found that there was a large patch of dead skin on his body. After tearing it off, there was new flesh underneath. He cleaned it up before changing into new clothes. When he came out of the room, he saw that half of the doctor's office was in ruins. The officials and guards of the imperial court were standing outside, and there were at least 1,000 people. "Do your own things," the Empress said coldly. "Your Majesty, who are we going to kill?" Qin Chuan stepped forward and cupped his hands. "As long as Your Majesty gives the order, the 100,000 aboriginal soldiers will immediately trample it to the ground. Not even a blade of grass will grow. Get lost." The Empress scolded. Qin Chuan didn't get angry even though he was scolded. He just didn't know who His Majesty was going to behead. Why did he get angry when he asked? Renbochin nodded at everyone and followed the Empress back to the palace. Renbochin accompanied the Empress as they walked around the palace. He felt a lingering fear in his heart. If anything had happened to him and the Empress, even if Erhua could secure the throne, there was an 80% chance that the human race would perish when the foreign races came after a decade or two. Although Honeysuckle was extremely talented, he had too little time. Even if Honeysuckle reached the Empress's current level in just over a decade, how could he be a match for the foreign races? It was too dangerous this time. "How are your injuries?" the Empress asked. "It's not a big deal." When Renbochin woke up, he checked his body. Although he was still injured, it wasn't a big deal. However, even with the strength of his body and the medicine of this world, he still had serious injuries after waking up. It could be seen how serious the injuries he had suffered at that time were. "When can we go back?" the Empress asked again. "How long have you been back?" Ren Baqian asked. 16 hours. 2 more days. I want to bring some people with me. Ren Baqian touched his head and said, "With the strength of those people, the 2 of us should be enough. I want them to leave no one alive." The Empress said coldly. Ren Baqian smacked his lips. Her Majesty was really angry. However, he was also very angry. How many people were there in the Rising Sun City? Was there even 100 million people? It was impossible to leave no one alive. Ren Baqian's current strength was less than 1,500 kilograms, so he couldn't bring too many people with him. However, it shouldn't be a problem to kill all the big and small officials. The number of people to be killed wasn't a small number, so it was good to bring a few people with him. The threat posed by 2 experts and a group of experts couldn't be compared at all. With the gradual increase in the strength of Earth, it was time for him to show his strength again. It had always been him and the Empress showing their faces. If they knew that there were dozens of spirit world experts in the martial arts center, would anyone really dare to attack them? Even if something happened to the 2 of them, the remaining people could tear them to pieces. Bring Xianjia and Lin Chaola. Then, bring a few people from the Department of Inspection and the Ministry of War. Tai Yan and Wu Qing from the Department of Inspection are both Cardinal Heaven experts. Qin Chuan, Lian Liang from the Department of War, and Yuan Sha from the Department of Cavalry should be enough. If we are still short of manpower, Wuji City still has more than 130 winged cavalry warriors and more than 50 earth will experts. Ren Baqian calculated the number of people he would bring this time. He didn't even need to mobilize the winged cavalry warriors and disciples from the martial arts center. By the time they arrived, those who needed to be killed would have already been killed. All right, that will be the arrangement. The Empress knew that he could only bring a limited number of people and nodded in agreement. When we return, we will be high up in the sky. With your Majesty's help, there will be 9 people. I wonder if you can bring so many people back to the ground. Ren Baqian asked again. Ren Baqian only knew that the Empress could bring him up in the sky, but he didn't know if she could bring so many people down. In any case, if Qin Chuan and the others fell down, they would be dead. Even if it was the sea below. It wasn't that they couldn't make parachutes, but that it would take time, and they would have to return a few days later. However, looking at the Empress's current expression, she didn't want to wait any longer. It's fine. The Empress waved her hand. After the 2 of them discussed, Ren Baqian's anger dissipated a little. In any case, they would be able to kill their way back in 2 days. However, the anger in the Empress's heart continued to burn and didn't subside at all. She would probably only be appeased after taking revenge. If Ren Baqian didn't wait for revenge overnight, the Empress would take revenge on the spot before she could think clearly. For the next 2 days, even after seeing Hua, the Empress's cold expression didn't ease much. Hua was so scared that he hid far away from her and didn't dare to be naughty for 2 days straight. This child was very talented and had sharp senses. He knew that his biological mother was currently in a rage. If he provoked her again, he wouldn't be able to resolve it with just a round of beatings. He would need at least 2 rounds of beatings. 2 days later, Ren Baqian sneaked into Qingxin Palace Hall. The new Qingxin Palace Hall was much bigger than before, and it now had a lot more books. The books that he brought back from Earth and the loot from destroying the sects were split into 2 sets. One set was placed in Black Bamboo Academy, and the other was placed in Qingxin Palace Hall. He pushed open the door and saw that Lin Chaola was still lying on the table, drooling. There was also a gurgling sound that sounded like snoring, but was actually coming from her chest. Usually, when Lin Xiaola was in a good mood, she would make such a sound. It had great effects on her, such as healing injuries and diseases, and could even promote the growth of her strength. Renbochin guessed that it was probably through the vibration of her blood and bones, or some kind of vibration of her organs, that this sound could be heard. However, he didn't know which of these two possibilities was the chicken and which was the egg. She still looked like a 17 or 18-year-old girl, delicate and pretty. She wore a blue tube top and a short skirt that revealed her smooth shoulders and soft abdomen. Renbochin looked at her lying there and couldn't help but think of many things that happened in the past. Then, he slapped the back of her head. Lin Xiaola jumped up and slashed with her claws. Whoa, let's go and do something. Renbochin's arm was scratched, leaving a few white marks. Oh. When Lin Xiaola saw that it was Renbochin, her eyelids drooped again. She looked drowsy and obviously hadn't woken up yet. Are you sleeping more than before? Renbochin was a little puzzled. In the past, she could still sense it when he pushed the door open. But now, she didn't even respond when he pushed the door open. I'm growing. Lin Xiaola yawned. Let's go. He brought Lin Xiaola to the garden and heard the sound of drums and zither coming from inside. The music was intense as if two armies were confronting each other. There was the sound of drums, swords, and horses. It made the scene of a battlefield unconsciously appear in front of their eyes and made their blood boil. When they turned into the garden, they saw the Empress leaning on a reclining chair and drinking the wine in her cup. Xanjie, Tai Yan, Qin Chuan, and the rest were wearing helmets and armor and standing at the side. Xanjie carried a long sword on her back, Tai Yan and the rest were carrying long sabers, Qin Chuan was carrying a long saber, and Lian Liang was actually carrying a mace. The rest of you may leave. The Empress waved her hand and dismissed the musicians. How much do all of you weigh? Renbochin glanced at the crowd. He knew that Xanjie's weapon and armor added up to more than 60 kilograms. The saber weighs 80 kilograms, and the armor weighs 130 kilograms, Tai Yan said. My saber weighs 173 kilograms, and it's made of meteoric iron. It's indestructible and can break through anything. This armor is called the Mountain Shifter, and it weighs 160 kilograms. Besides Her Majesty, no one can break it. Qin Chuan stroked his beard and boasted. This Luan Fang weighs 180 kilograms, and the armor weighs 170 kilograms. Renbochin listened. Based on the iron prices in Dayo in the past, the armor and weapons that easily weighed more than 100 kilograms were considered priceless. It's too heavy. Take off the armor and weapons, but we can still wear them. Renbochin calculated in his mind. The few of them looked regretful as it was rare for them to have the opportunity to dress so neatly. Xanjie, you don't have to take it off. It's not that heavy. Renbochin stopped Xanjie. This bespectacled lady only wore safety pants and a sports vest under her armor. When she didn't have a sports vest, she wrapped her chest with a piece of cloth. Then, he swept his gaze across the crowd and took off their armor. Everyone was bare-chested, revealing their dragon-like muscles with a piece of cloth wrapped around their crotch. Two of them didn't even have a piece of cloth wrapped around their crotch. Go back and change your clothes. I'll give you 15 minutes. The Empress poured wine into her mouth and continued to pour wine. 15 minutes later, everyone changed into their usual robes and returned. Before we leave, I'll tell you about the situation on the other side. Renbochin spent an hour explaining the general situation on Earth to everyone, especially reminding them to be on guard against those weapons. Everyone was shocked to find out that they were actually going to another world. It was truly unbelievable. If it wasn't for the fact that the person who said this was Xiao Prince Consort and that the Empress didn't refute him, they wouldn't have believed it. Even so, it took them some time to digest what Rinpoche said. According to Her Highness, the people in that world are weak, but their weapons are powerful. However, the weapons also need to be controlled. Why don't we bring 20,000 soldiers and make it Dao's territory? Qin Chuan's eyes lit up. Now that the Yun nation had been destroyed, the people in the Ministry of War had no war to fight. They were overjoyed to suddenly discover such a new world. The Empress's eyes flickered. If it weren't for the limited number of people that Rinpoche could bring, she would have been tempted. However, there wasn't much point in thinking about it. She had this idea before, but it was a world away and could only be accessed through Rinpoche. This piece of land wasn't worth much. Instead of thinking about this, it was better to think about the vast land outside the 60,000 mountains. Let's go. The Empress held a bottle of wine in one hand and Rinpoche in the other. Her body was overflowing with murderous intent, and Rinpoche was dragging Xianzhi, Lin Chaola, Tai Yen, and the others with his other hand. Chapter 11-13. The plane explosion caused a great shock in the world and was on the news of various countries. However, that was all the ordinary people knew. Only the higher-ups of some countries knew through various channels that the two people on the plane were at the center of the incident. Those who heard this news felt pity, indifference, and even contempt. It was simply foolish to want to face an entire country with one person's strength. Even if they took advantage for a while, so what? No matter how strong he was, what could he do? Many things happened in the empire over the past 10 days. In addition to the 2 knights and an airline director, many people were arrested and demoted. In particular, the high-ranking officials, parliamentarians, and military officials of the Eagle faction were suppressed. The explosion of the plane made the royal family of the unsetting Sun Empire furious, especially when some people exposed their close relationship with the United States, which made them even more furious. For a time, the undercurrents in the empire were turbulent. Meanwhile, within China, some people were secretly itching to try. No one could survive an explosion like that. Furthermore, the Rin family possessed too many things that were coveted by others. Although the old man had suppressed all of them, everyone knew that he wouldn't be able to do so for too long. In a few months at most, someone was bound to make a move. As for the United States, they saved the world once again by eliminating the 2 people who had caused great damage to the balance and stability of the world. Although it was a pity that they had lost the things they had, since they couldn't be captured or obtained, they had to be killed. The English Channel, 10,000 meters above the ground. As the air fluctuated, 9 figures appeared in the sky and fell violently. It had to be said that free falling from an altitude of 10,000 meters was a very rare experience. Qin Chuan, Tai Yen, and the others felt the rapid fall and looked down at the sea that was getting closer and closer to them. The Empress didn't stop until she was 1,000 meters above the ground. It was as if she had stepped on an invisible floating object. However, it was only for a short while. Following which, the Empress stomped on the ground every 50 meters to slow everyone down. Every time he released the force, he felt as if his arms were going to break, and he couldn't help but wonder if he should let go and throw them down. However, Lin Chaola was like an octopus, crawling along his arms to his back. She hugged his chest tightly and screamed, "Ah!" One had to know that Lin Chaola was afraid of water, and the deep blue sea below made her limbs weak. When they were about 100 meters above the surface of the sea, the Empress tapped her feet, and everyone suddenly changed their direction and leaped to one side. The Empress led everyone in the air as if she was pulling a long string of kites. She flew straight toward the cliff in the distance. The narrowest part of the English Channel was only about 30 kilometers wide. This distance was a blink of an eye for everyone. This was a cliff in the middle of the town. Looking down the cliff, one could see many buildings, dams that extended into the sea, towering lighthouses, and cars and pedestrians coming and going. This is another world. Qin Chuan and the others looked around. With their eyesight, although they were far away, they could still see a lot of things, especially the exotic buildings, which made everyone feel very surprised. Lin Chaola was still lying behind Renbaqian like an octopus, screaming miserably. "Let go!" Renbaqian wanted to pull her down, but Lin Chaola hugged him very tightly. Renbaqian exerted force, and Lin Chaola came down along with his clothes and pants. The Empress glanced at him with an indifferent expression. JPG Renbaqian rubbed his forehead, put on his pants, and didn't care about the others. He pressed the communication device on his wrist, and an operation interface appeared in the air. Contact Yang Sr. A moment later, a translucent image appeared in the air. Yang Sen was wearing a shirt, and it seemed like he was in the office. "Mr. Ren, are you okay?" Yang Sen was pleasantly surprised. At the same time, he saw that there seemed to be a lot of people around Renbaqian. Several burly men stood there like a wall and were even more robust than those in the martial arts center. What's this?" Qin Chuan's big face was directly in front of the image, and his big hand touched the air. "I can't touch it. Get out of the way, you are blocking the camera." Renbaqian took 2 steps away and said with a cold face, "Arrange for someone to pick me up. 9 people, go to the Fog City. I want a few guides, as well as the location of all the high-ranking officials and military bases in the Rising Sun City." Renbaqian was determined. If he didn't demolish the Rising Sun City, he would change his surname to Hua. This time, if it weren't for the Empress's quick reaction and his ability to travel between worlds, he would have been put into a box. He didn't care what kind of impact it would have on the world, whether it would cause World War III or any other chain reaction. His only purpose was to demolish the Rising Sun City. "Whoever wants me dead, I will let them die first." Looking at Renbaqian's fierce face, Yang Sen was also frightened. Although he didn't know how much damage Renbaqian and the Empress could cause, he could tell from what happened in the Fog City 2 weeks ago. With the strength of these 2 people, if they simply wanted to destroy, it wouldn't be much worse than a nuclear bomb. Moreover, it wasn't just 2 people. Renbaqian and the Empress had a total of 9 people. Apart from him and the Empress, there were 7 other people. They were definitely experts, and they were far better than those burly men in the martial arts center. This time, something big was going to happen. From the moment Renbaqian and the Empress were attacked, something big was definitely going to happen that would shake the world. Although Yang Sen was frightened, there were still some things he wanted to say. According to the information we received, from all kinds of traces, the mastermind of this matter shouldn't be the Rising Sun City. Renbaqian was a little stunned. These days, he had been itching to demolish the Rising Sun City. If it wasn't them, then who could it be? It should be done by the United States. Is there anyone from the Rising Sun City involved? Renbaqian asked with an ashen face. After enduring his anger for so many days, he was naturally in a bad mood when he suddenly found out that the culprit was someone else. In any case, he was bombed in the Rising Sun City, and he was thinking about finding trouble with the Rising Sun City first. No matter who was involved, from top to bottom, no one would be spared. It seems that a few people were involved, but they have been arrested. As for whether there are fish that escaped the net, I'm not too sure, Yang Sen said. I don't know the details of this matter. How about this, I will get someone to pick you up first. I will report it to the higher-ups and see if there are any other secrets. Okay. Get someone to bring me a set of clothes. Renbaqian sent his location to Yang Sen and hung up. His face was gloomy. Whether they did it or not, they can't get away with it, the Empress said coldly. Whether you did it or not, if I say so, then it's true. Kill them first. If you kill the wrong person, consider yourself unlucky. Renbochin thought for a while and said, "Your Majesty, there's no need to cause too much trouble here. The target is the United States. If we cause too much of a ruckus and alert the United States, it will be difficult to find them later on," Renbochin said after thinking about it. Of course, this matter didn't need to be too big in terms of the scale of destruction. If the target people were involved, what might happen in a while would be enough to shake the whole world. "Your Majesty, we will kill whoever you say." Qin Chuan looked fierce. Although he didn't know what happened, someone actually dared to attack Her Majesty. "Let me see if my knife is sharp or not." "Calm." Miao Shu Wu. Chapter 11-14. In a certain office in China, the old man who once suppressed many people was sitting there looking at the documents in his hands. In this era, paper was still the carrier of many documents. The most important point was that it was far more secure than the security of the internet. This was an irreplaceable advantage of paper. "Come in," the old man ordered when he heard the knock on the door. "Sir, there's news about the Empress and the gate." The middle-aged secretary walked in quickly. "What news?" The old man's face, which was as calm as an ancient well, began to fluctuate with the news. "The Empress and the gate are fine. I just contacted Yang Sen, the director of the Messier 87 Bureau." The secretary's face was full of disbelief. They actually survived that kind of situation, and according to Yang Sen's report, there were no injuries. The old man was also a little surprised, and then there was a smile in his eyes. "As expected of the Empress and the gate. This is the path of human beings we pursue, a strong body and superpersonal strength. Now, we can finally prove it." The old man understood very well that the two of them must have left the moment they were attacked. Under normal circumstances, the two of them would have returned to Shanghai or even Wuji City before leaving. Since the two of them were fine, it meant that they had reacted at the moment of the attack, either resisted the explosion, or left the earth the moment they reacted. Either way, it showed the ability of the two of them. Thanks to Sir for suppressing those people. Otherwise, when those two people came back, there would be a big mess. The secretary said admiringly. The old man waved his hand. After all, they have been cooperating with the country for so long. It is reasonable to see someone jump out to get a share of the rich right after something happened to them. In any case, it's good that they are back. Where are they? What are they doing now? With the temperament of those two people, I'm afraid they won't give up after such a thing happened. They will most likely make a big scene. Yes, as Sir said, they immediately asked Director Yang to arrange for someone to pick them up and asked for the addresses of all the officials of the Rising Sun City. When the secretary said this, he really felt that the two of them were terrible. They actually wanted to make a move on all the senior officials of the Rising Sun City. However, they had the strength and confidence to do so. I'm afraid they are looking for the wrong people, but the Rising Sun City can't be completely separated. The old man smiled faintly. They are not two people, but 9, the secretary added. Oh. They've mobilized troops. The old man said with some interest. After thinking for a while, he said, "Connect me to Yang Sen from the Messier 87 Bureau." "Thank you very much, sir." However, since someone else was involved, they weren't treated unjustly. "Don't worry, I know who the culprit is. Since I'm here, I'll find trouble with them first. I'll kill those who deserve to be killed and beat up those who deserve to be beaten up before finding trouble with the United States." Renbochin smiled at the elder. "If this fire doesn't go out, you probably won't be able to sleep. It's good that you know what to do," the old man said with a smile. The two of them chatted for a while before he switched off the communication device. He actually received a call from that big boss. It was really unexpected, but it was also reasonable. He had already contacted Wuji City and Wanyan. Nothing had happened in the past few days. Renbochin originally wanted to see if any bugs would jump out and take this opportunity to kill them all. According to Wanyan, there were indeed some people who were ready to make trouble, but they were all suppressed by that Mr. just now. This made Renbochin have a good impression of him. In addition, the nation had always been on his side regarding Ning Caichen's matter, which made him feel quite satisfied. With such a leader, he didn't have to worry about any twists and turns in his cooperation with the nation for the next 20 to 30 years. Given his age and physical condition, it wouldn't be a problem for him to maintain this position for a few decades. After waiting for more than 2 hours, 4 limousines appeared on the side of the cliff. A person got out of one of the limousines. It was the military officer from the embassy whom they had met before. His surname was Lu Huining. Everyone who had been waiting impatiently jumped down from the top of the cliff. The heavy landing sound gave Lu Huining a shock. He turned his head and saw Renbochin, the Empress, and a few other people. Other than Renbochin, all the men were wearing retro robes with large sleeves. As for the 2 women, one was wearing a full suit of armor and the other was wearing a strapless short skirt. The most eye-catching thing was the weapons in everyone's hands. There were sabers, mace, broadswords, and swords with cold glints and a faint smell of blood. In addition to a sword, the woman in armor also carried a bow and a quiver of arrows on her waist. "Thank you." Renbochin nodded at Lu Huining and got into the back seat of the first car with the Empress. The others also got into the other cars. "Hey, this isn't as comfortable as ours. It's too stifling," Qin Chuan groaned as soon as he got into the car. The interior of Dayo's cars was enlarged and naturally couldn't be compared to these limousines. However, there was a 100-year gap in stability, noise, and other aspects. "Where are you guys going first?" Lu Huining asked as he got into the front passenger seat. "Let's eat first. Get someone to prepare enough food for 3,000 people and prepare more meat," Renbochin said. "Find a secluded place. We still have work to do in a while, so don't alarm people in case they run away." "Understood." Lu Huining immediately responded, but he was speechless. Sure enough, the stronger one was, the more they ate. Judging from their appetite, these people were the best of the best. It had to be said that preparing enough food for 3,000 people wasn't an easy task, especially in order to hide the fact that the food had to be as exquisite and delicious as possible. Even the embassy had to put in a lot of effort. This kind of concealment could only be done for 1 day at most. Renbochin was the fastest to finish his meal. He then turned on the projector and flipped through some information. "Get someone to take us to the locations of these people in a while." Renbochin casually pointed at a few people. The first one was the Empress, who was only 34 years old and had only been on the throne for 2 years. A few key princes, the Prime Minister, the Minister of the Interior, the Minister of Defense, the Permanent Undersecretary of Defense, the Chief of the Defense Staff, the Deputy Chief of the Defense Staff. Liang Qiu looked at the names that Renbochin pointed at and smiled bitterly. He knew that something big would happen this time, but he didn't expect the other party to be so ambitious. More than half of the upper echelons of the Rising Sun City were among the other party's targets. "We can't show our faces in this matter," Liang Qing said first. Renbochin's actions were his business, but China couldn't be involved. All he could do was get someone to lead the way and then send them back to China. "I know." Renbochin nodded. The Deputy Chief of the Defense Staff and the Minister of the Interior of China aren't in the fog capital. Prince Charles and Prince Henry are in the United States, and we don't know the locations of the others. The Empress is in Buckingham Palace, the Prime Minister should be in his residence at this time, and the Minister of Defense, as far as I know, is attending Sir Mason's banquet today. In fact, you can just look for the Empress, the Prime Minister, and the Minister of Defense. As far as we know, the officials of the Rising Sun Empire aren't involved in this matter. Ren Baqian nodded slightly. If he didn't say the last sentence, he would have asked what exactly could they do. If you want to make a move, it's best not to do it in a crowded place. You will still go to the United States later, right? If your existence is known, it will be easy for the United States to get the news. After all, your existence itself is noticed by a lot of people. When that time comes, it will be more troublesome to go to the United States. Get me another plane and arrange a flight route. It must be hidden and fast. I will go to the United States in 3 hours. Don't get blown up this time. I can get you a Concorde B-2 commercial plane that can cruise at 2 times the speed of sound. It will only take 2.5 hours to reach Gotham City from the fog capital. That will be the arrangement. Prepare some cooked food and wine on the plane, Ren Baqian said. He looked at the people who hadn't finished eating and didn't want to wait any longer. He clapped his hands and said, "Everyone, get ready to set off." After he finished speaking, he looked at the Empress. "You make the arrangements," the Empress said faintly. "All right, Xange, Sir Tai, and Sir Wu, I will have to trouble the 3 of you to capture someone alive. The target is attending the banquet. Create a disturbance outside and then capture the target. Try not to be discovered. Someone will lead the way and bring you to meet up with us later. I'm familiar with this matter. Don't worry, Your Highness." Tai Yan and Wu Qing laughed. They were officials of the Department of Inspection, and their job was to kill and capture people. "Minister Qin, Sir Lian, and Sir Yuan, I will have to trouble the 3 of you to capture the Prime Minister." "Don't worry." Qin Chuan patted his chest and guaranteed. "Your Majesty, let's go meet the Queen." Ren Baqian said. "The Queen." The Empress snorted. Night. In a manor on the outskirts of Fog City. The manor covered an area of more than 10 acres. Outside the manor was a forest, and inside the manor was a cement road leading to a fountain with gardens on both sides. Behind the fountain was a 3-story building that was brightly lit. Even outside the manor, one could hear the music coming from it. 2 cars stopped in the distance. A young man in casual clothes opened the door and said to the people behind him, "This is as far as we can go. What are you going to do next?" Tai Yan looked around with a relaxed smile on his fierce face. This matter couldn't be simpler. Wu Qing, kill them from the main gate. General Xange, block the back door. That kid, bring me in to capture the target. The young man was a little stunned. Wasn't he supposed to try not to be discovered? Except for the target, leave no one alive. Dead people don't leak information. Tai Yan laughed with a cold expression. Hiss. The young man took a deep breath. He didn't know how many high-ranking officials and tycoons were inside. Kill all of these people. The young man didn't dare to bring them in and quickly said, "Wait a moment." After that, he quickly contacted the ambassador and explained the situation. Liang Qing was also shocked. This group of people was really cruel by nature. In comparison, Ren Baqian was simply a kind person. Calm. Miao Shu Wu. Chapter 11:15. Sir was not actually a title, but a general term for a title. Usually, people who had made great contributions to the empire or had outstanding positions in their respective fields could obtain it. Sir Mason was one of them. As a member of the House of Commons and an important figure in the Independent Party, Sir Mason actually had great influence in many industries, especially as one of the core figures of the Rising Hawk faction in recent years. He had close personal relationships with many military personnel. This banquet was also a private gathering of the Hawks who had recently been suppressed by various parties, including many people from the Conservative Party, Liberal Party, and independent party. At this time, Sir Mason was talking to several men with a smile on his face. From time to time, he would look up at the current Minister of Defense, Baron Arateline, or raise his glass to toast with a man from a distance. At the same time, he could perfectly follow up the conversation next to him. It's a pity for Jeremy and Ferdinand. No matter what, they're doing it for the glory of the Empire. Sir Mason nodded lightly. Jeremy and Ferdinand were both important members of the party. Although they were now in prison, they still had a chance to come out. After all, these two knights had also made great contributions to the country. As for those two people, as long as they were alive, then the glory of the Empire where the sun never sets would not exist. Who could imagine that such a powerful country would bow down to two people? And it was after they had caused so much damage to the country. Just as Sir Mason was thinking about this, he suddenly heard something coming from outside. It seemed to be someone's cry. Just as he thought about this, he seemed to hear another cry, a little clearer than the previous one. Without needing him to arrange for someone to go out, someone immediately went out to check. However, as soon as the person walked out, he let out a scream and fell forward. His head rolled off, and blood spurted out. A woman standing not far from the door suddenly let out a shrill scream, breaking the silence in the hall. A strong man wearing a wide-sleeved robe that seemed to be worn in the ancient eastern country a few centuries ago strode in with a cruel and ferocious smile on his face. He waved the long knife in his hand, and the woman's scream stopped abruptly. Blood spurted into the air. "Ah, dash! Guards, where are the bodyguards? Catch him! Guns are allowed." The hall suddenly became chaotic. Those who were close to the hall ran toward the inside. "That kid, see which one is it? I think these guys all look the same." Tai Yan turned around and looked behind him. A man wearing a mask stuck his head out to take a look and suddenly exclaimed, "Be careful." A few men in suits pulled out pistols from their pockets. "Attack! Dead or alive?" Sir Mason shouted. If anything happened to these people in his manor, no matter how strong he was, he would not be able to bear the consequences. Bang! Bang! The hall glowed with the light of muzzles. The steel blade in Tai Yan's hand spun and blocked the bullets. Then, he grinned. These guys shouldn't be the targets, and neither should those women. In a flash, he appeared in front of the two bodyguards. With a flash of cold light in his hands, the two bodyguards were immediately cut off from their chests. Blood sprayed everywhere. After a few more flashes, there were a few more corpses on the ground. The hall was filled with screams. Many of the gentlemen who had been maintaining their poise all this while revealed fearful gazes. Most of them broke into a run. Only a few of them could barely support themselves and stand in front of the ladies. However, Tai Yan's figure disappeared in an instant. It was as if the air had exploded in the hall. The people who ran to the other rooms and upstairs were all turned into corpses. When Tai Yan returned to his original spot, everyone was cowering in fear. Around them were mutilated corpses. There were no injured people or complete corpses. "Who the hell are you?" "A Chinese." "What do you want? What do you want?" someone shouted with a trembling voice. Everyone looked at the tall and muscular Chinese man with fear. Everyone wanted to know what he wanted to do. However, he had killed more than 10 people without giving them a chance to speak since he came in. However, to Tai Yan's ears, it was like a bird's language. "Hurry up, point out the target for me. See if he's still alive. Otherwise, I'm afraid I'll accidentally kill him." Tai Yan had a hideous smile on his face. Blood flowed slowly under his feet. Bang! Suddenly, there was a gunshot. A man was holding a short pistol in his hand. There was a bullet embedded in Tai Yan's back. As he moved slightly, the bullet fell to the ground. Only his clothes were a little damaged, and the skin under his clothes was a little red. Tai Yan pondered. Did someone hit him again just now? Then, with a hideous smile on his face, he flashed through the crowd and grabbed the head of the man who fired the gun. No! The masked man exclaimed. However, at the same time, Tai Yan's head was instantly crushed like tofu. What did you say? Tai Yan looked up. He's the Minister of Defense. The target this time. The masked man was trembling all over. This was no longer just cruel and fierce. This was simply a god of death. Tai Yan was slightly stunned. His eyes were filled with ferocity, and his face was cruel and sinister. Why didn't you say so earlier? I said. The masked young man wanted to cry. I can't say it as fast as you kill. Tai Yan frowned and looked down. He was thinking that the target had been crushed to death by him. He was afraid that he would be beaten. On the other hand, he felt bitter, lamented his bad luck, and hoped that Her Majesty would be gentler. The long saber in his hand turned into a ray of cold light. Since the target was dead, the rest should be killed as well. A young man and a young woman were shivering in the grass. In the distance, a woman in full armor flicked her finger, and the blood dripping from her fingertip pierced a hole in the soil like a sharp arrow. At her feet were two corpses with a big hole in their chests and their hearts crushed. After doing all this, Ex-Angel looked at her fingers and saw that there was no trace of blood. Then, she pushed up her glasses and looked in another direction. Two little bugs, Your Majesty, there's no need to kill our way in. He looked at the guards in red uniforms in front of Buckingham Palace and pulled the Empress's arm. Oh. Let's go by air. He pointed upward. There was a square in front of Buckingham Palace. If they killed the guards, the pedestrians and plainclothes in the square would definitely find out. They had to move stealthily to avoid alerting others. Carrying Renbochin, she moved and appeared 100 meters in the air. She moved as if she was walking and could cross more than 100 meters in one step. In almost a breath's time, they landed on the roof and found that this building was actually in the shape of a circle. In the middle was a garden, and there were 2 rows of buildings at the back and on both sides. It should be there. Renbochin pointed to one of the balconies. A strong wind blew, and they were already on the balcony when they stopped. Renbochin turned his head to look down and saw that the guards below didn't notice anything. He then pushed open the balcony door and entered. Who is it? A woman exclaimed. Come. There were 2 women in the room. One of them was in her 30s and was wearing pajamas. She was sitting at a desk and reading something. The other one looked like a bodyguard. Just as she was about to call for help, Renbochin stepped forward and pinched her face. If you don't want your master to die too quickly, be quiet. Renbochin felt that he was a good person who was so kind to the enemy's bodyguards. Who are you? What do you want? It was unknown when the woman in pajamas had a pistol in her hand and was pointing it at the Empress. There's actually a pistol in the Queen's bedroom. Renbochin turned his head and looked at her with great interest. She was in her 30s, had brown hair tied up at the back of her head, and had black eyes. Her looks were passable, and her face was a little big. It had to be said that the appearance of the royal family of the Rising Sun Empire was rather average. It was already a compliment to say that she was pretty. The Queen only saw a figure flash in front of her, and the pistol in her hand had already disappeared without a trace. The Empress grabbed her by the neck and lifted her up, carefully sizing her up. Is this the Queen? She can't be compared to you. You are making things too difficult for her. Renbochin felt that the bodyguard in his hand was troublesome. She had already kicked him a few times, once on his crotch and once on his throat. She even wanted to use her legs to wrap around his arms and neck to break them. The queen was already in his hands, yet she still dared to resist. She was really courageous. In order to save trouble, Renbachien knocked the back of her head. From what he saw on TV, a knock here could knock someone unconscious. As for whether it was true or not, he wasn't sure. In any case, the person in his hand had softened. Whether there would be any sequelae or whether she would become a vegetable, Renbachien had no idea. "Your Majesty, please let go. I think she is about to die. We are not here to kill." Renbachien looked at the struggling queen. "Then what are we here to do?" the Empress asked coldly. She loosened her hand, and the queen immediately fell to the ground, clutching her neck and gasping for breath. "What we are here for depends on their performance and answers." Renbachien carried 2 chairs, one for himself and one for the Empress. Then, he calmly asked, "Do you know who we are?" "Who are you?" The queen looked up and asked in a panic. "Don't you want to think about it? Do you need me to remind you?" "If I do, the price will be very high." Renbachien looked amiable. The queen carefully looked at their faces. The Empress's red clothes, Renbachien's bald head, and that high reflectivity. Her pupils suddenly shrank, and she looked incredulous. "It's you. You are still alive. Do you wish for us to die?" Renbachien's smile became even more amiable. "No, that's not what I meant, that's what you meant. Not only did you think about it, but you also did it." Renbachien bent down and moved his face closer. Then, he was kicked aside by the Empress. Renbachien jumped up from the ground. His nose was not his nose, and his eyes were not his eyes. "You kicked me again. Why are you so close?" Renbachien grimaced for a long time before muttering, "Love is tolerance, love is patience, love is tolerance, love is full of hope, beating is affection, and scolding is love," the Empress suddenly said. Renbachien took a deep breath and asked, "Which bastard said that?" The Empress raised her eyebrows and said, "You said it before." "That's right," Renbachien said decisively. The queen sat on the ground and looked at the jealous couple with a look of panic and bewilderment. "Calm. Miao Shu Wu." Chapter 11:16. The queen panicked when she recognized the 2 men. Even the army couldn't do anything to them. They survived the explosion at an altitude of 10,000 meters and didn't seem to be injured at all. She couldn't think of anyone in this world who could hurt them. She only knew one thing. If these 2 wanted to kill her, she definitely wouldn't be able to escape. Furthermore, the guards wouldn't be able to save her. He could even kill him in front of everyone and swagger his way out. Under such circumstances, she was in a state of panic and despair. The only thing that gave her hope was that they didn't do it. "We didn't do it, it was the United States," the queen said. She was really scared and felt wronged. She felt that she had suffered an undeserved disaster. "I was on your plane and was blown up in your territory. You're telling me that you didn't do it?" Renbachien sneered. "I'm telling the truth." The queen felt that she had been wronged. If she didn't want to maintain her identity, she would have burst into tears. Ever since she was young, she felt like crying when she was wronged. After all, she was just an ordinary person in her 30s. She was well protected and didn't have much experience. It was only because of the death of her brother that she inherited the throne as the first in line for 2 years. Although the Empire of the Sun never sets was a constitutional monarchy, the king and queen were more symbolic than practical. To put it bluntly, they were just nobles. Under such circumstances, she wasn't much better than an ordinary person. She couldn't compare to the prime minister who had negotiated peace with Renbachien. He was the real elite of the country. She hoped that Qin Chuan wouldn't accidentally slap the Prime Minister to death. Ren Baqin wondered if he should contact Qin Chuan again. However, after calculating the time, they should be done with their work. Actually, I feel quite wronged. Who did I offend? I should have stayed at home obediently. You arrested my people. When I got off the plane, I would have to face your guns. When I flew home, I was bombed, Ren Baqin said faintly. He felt that he was more wronged than the queen in front of him. The problem is that we didn't do it. The United States sent people to do it. 2 knights were involved and have been arrested. I hate those who collude with the Americans as much as you do, the queen said anxiously. What did she say? The Empress turned her head and looked at Ren Baqin. From the beginning to the end, she had no idea what the other party was talking about. The only miniature earphone that could translate was hanging on Ren Baqin's ear. Ren Baqin briefly explained. The Empress looked at Ren Baqin coldly. I said they did it. Ren Baqin shrugged his shoulders. He knew that the Empress was furious. Since the day of the explosion, she had been suppressing her anger. She was like a porcupine, full of killing intent. He had not killed anyone yet, which meant that he had restrained himself. If he were to hold it in for another day, he would probably erupt like a volcano. The communication device on Ren Baqin's hand vibrated. He opened it and saw that it was a man wearing a mask. Sir, we are near Buckingham Palace with the Prime Minister. How do we get in? Let them take the Prime Minister to the rooftop. Don't be seen by the guards. Then, when you see an open balcony, come in from there. After a while, a few people walked in from the balcony. Lian Liang threw the person in his hand to the ground, turned around, and smashed the balcony door with his mace. Ren Baqin raised his eyebrows. Be quiet, we are sneaking in. Ren Baqin raised his eyebrows. He then looked down at the Prime Minister, who was lying on the ground, and asked, Is he alive? Qin Chuan used the tip of his foot to flip him over. He was alive when we caught him. If he is dead, he was the one who killed him. He even pointed at Lian Liang as he spoke. Lian Liang was stunned. He didn't expect Qin Chuan to betray him so quickly. Seeing that the Empress was looking at him, he said, He's alive. If you don't believe me, I will step on him. Forget it. Ren Baqin waved his hand. If he stepped on him, he would be dead. Could you not treat human life like grass? He had to do this meticulous work himself. He stretched out his hand to test the Prime Minister. He was still breathing and was very much alive. He gave Lian Liang an admiring look. Then, he was slapped in the face. He woke up and spat out a few teeth. Footsteps could be heard from the corridor. Ren Baqin stretched out his hand to get everyone to be quiet. He pinched the Prime Minister's neck with one hand to ensure that he couldn't make a sound. Your Majesty, what happened? The guard's voice came from outside the door. The Prime Minister's body twitched. After he woke up, he didn't look at his surroundings and didn't know where he was. At this moment, hearing the Queen's voice made him understand the situation. Nothing, I accidentally broke something, the Queen took the initiative and said. After she finished speaking, she looked at the people in the room with a worried look. She knew that the guard couldn't save her. Are you really okay? You can leave now. Ren Baqin only released the Prime Minister's neck after hearing the footsteps getting further away. Mr. Prime Minister, we meet again. Hearing this voice, Harold Belfort raised his head with a look of astonishment. Previously, he had guessed that these Easterners were related to Ren Baqin and thought that they were here for revenge. He didn't expect Ren Baqin to be sitting here safe and sound. Joy flashed in Harold Belfort's eyes. If the other party was here for revenge, he would really be in danger. Although this matter had nothing to do with him, he could tell from their actions that they were a bunch of powerless people who didn't care about human lives. Furthermore, they were extremely powerful. Even if he didn't do it, they might not let him off. Now that Rinpoche was still alive and looked safe and sound, he felt that his chances of survival were much higher. With a change of heart, he knew what had happened. He first looked at the queen and confirmed that she was fine. Then, he immediately said to Rinpoche, "We didn't do it. We didn't do it. It was done by the Americans. A few people colluded with them and have been arrested. We can hand them over to you. Do you think that you can shirk all responsibility just like that?" Rinpoche sneered. "Indeed, we didn't do it. Even if you kill us, you won't be able to take revenge. Instead, you will make those people behind the scenes happy." Harold Belfort had a bitter look on his face. Who would have thought that as the Prime Minister of a powerful country, he would have such a day? "What is he talking about?" the Empress asked. "He's telling me about the saying overseas, pain to your friends, delight to your enemies." Rinpoche motioned for the Prime Minister to go to the Queen's side. After he helped her up, he said, "Do you think you can shirk all responsibility just like that?" Sensing the change in his tone, Harold Belfort glanced at the Queen and asked, "What other requests do you have? There are more people who colluded with the United States than those arrested, right?" Harold Belfort hesitated for a while before saying, "There are still a few members of Parliament. In addition, the Minister of National Defense is also close to the United States. These things may have been instigated by him, but I don't have any evidence." "We don't need evidence to kill." Rinpoche then changed his tone. "However, it seems that your Minister of National Defense is dead. But are there really only these few people? Who else in the military is involved?" "There are a few others, all under the Minister of National Defense." "Hand these people over to me along with their families," Rinpoche said coldly. Harold Belfort said, "Although I'm the Prime Minister, I can't do whatever I want. Don't we still have the Queen? If the two of you can't do whatever you want, what's the use of keeping you? In order to save your lives, you have to pay a price. I don't care what you do, I just want to see the results." Rinpoche chuckled. Harold Belfort and the Queen looked at each other and saw the fear in her eyes. He then sighed and said, "I agree, but I need some time. Send them to China within 5 days. Also, don't let me know that there are still people involved who are still at large. That's definitely not the outcome you want to see." "I understand. In addition, double the amount of equipment you asked for. Add the number of scientists and 100 people. I don't care if you kidnap them or use other methods. It doesn't matter even if they aren't from the Empire of the Unsetting Sun. In any case, you have to hand them over to me," Rinpoche said. It was much easier for a country to do this than for him. Harold Belfort almost jumped up when he heard the first half of the sentence, but he was relieved when he heard the second half. This was a solution. "Remember, I want scientists. Don't just fill the numbers." Seeing that the other party had agreed, Rinpoche didn't make things difficult for them anymore. If he was given more time, he could still cut a piece of meat. However, he and the others would be leaving soon, and the conditions were about right, so he didn't say anything more. The Empress looked up at Rinpoche. Although she couldn't understand what he was saying, she could understand his words and knew that he wasn't going to kill these two people. This made her even more unhappy. As if reading her mind, Rinpoche patted the back of her hand and said, "Go to the United States in a while. When you get there, you will have the opportunity to make your move." The Queen and Harold Belfort had a strange expression on their faces. They were a little happy and a little happy. They were happy that the two of them had survived. They were happy that the United States, which almost got them killed, was going to be in big trouble. It was easy to imagine what would happen when such a group of murderers went there. After all, the United States was the one behind this incident. They would never let the people from the United States off. No matter how they fought, the two of them would feel happy. After waiting for half an hour, Renbochin received news that Tai Yen and the others had arrived near Buckingham Palace. Renbochin asked them to wait outside before he got up from his chair. The two of you will wait here for 3 hours. Don't give me trouble. If you give me trouble, I'll give you trouble, Renbochin said to the two of them. Seeing them nod, he said to the Empress, let's go to the United States. Just like how they came, they disappeared from the balcony without a sound. Harold Belfort and the Queen felt their strength depleted. Their bodies were sore and weak, and they couldn't stand steadily against the wall. They had survived at last. The Queen's eyes turned red, and tears started to fall. She had never encountered such a crisis in her life. She was really frightened just now. This group of people was too cruel. Chapter 11-17. Gotham City. As the plane slowly landed, a group of 6 bear-like burly men and 3 graceful women stepped out, attracting the attention of countless people. They were too strong. Even for the United States, which was generally tall and big, these men were too muscular. A few blonde and blue-eyed women couldn't help but feel their throats go dry. Strong men always exuded hormones all the time. Stop. What are you guys carrying? 2 uniformed white men stopped the group of people. Their gazes first swept across the Empress and the 2 Empresses a few times with a strange look in their eyes. Following which, they looked at Qin Chuan, Tai Yen, and the things wrapped in cloth behind them. The 3 of you, come over and check first. One of the men pointed at the Empress and the 2 women with a strange smile on his face. It was a little playful and somewhat greedy. Regardless of whether they were Chinese or not, most of them were easy to bully. Although there were female security guards, he had no intention of calling them over. He wanted to check them personally with his hands. However, the next second, a big hand grabbed the top of his head and squeezed. His skull, fresh blood, and brain matter immediately exploded. Although his words were incomprehensible to others, his expression and gaze made it so that everyone could understand. The people who saw this scene were stunned at first, followed by screams, and frantically ran in all directions. The other security guards saw this scene and immediately went limp on the ground. His eyes followed the big hand to his master, who was wearing sportswear and had a beard. He had a ferocious and cruel look on his face as he looked down at the security guard. He didn't look like he was looking at a person, but rather a bug. Save! The white man only managed to shout one word before his body slid to the ground. His chest caved in, and blood mixed with fragments of internal organs spurted out from his mouth and nose. The crowd didn't care about the 2 corpses on the ground. A few security guards rushed out from nearby, aimed at them, and opened fire. Lian Liang appeared in front of the security guards and swung his mace, which was wrapped in black cloth, at them. When the bodies flew out, they were all deformed. Yuan Sha punched a hole in the wall in front of him, and the few of them came out in a single file. Renbochin turned around and waved his hand. A man wearing a mask walked past the 2 corpses, paused for a moment, and then quickly followed him. Stay closer to me lest you get killed by stray bullets. Renbochin's voice wasn't loud, but it made the man shiver. 2 batches of airport security guards rushed out, but in the blink of an eye, they became a pile of broken limbs. After that, no one dared to rush over. If they rushed up, they would die. The guns of the security guards were no threat to these people. Who would dare to rush up? After all, it was just a job. As for the passengers, those that they met along the way had already run away. However, there were a few who were so scared that their legs turned to jelly and they couldn't move. Renbochin and the rest couldn't be bothered with them. They went all the way out of the airport. It had to be said that the police here reacted very quickly. There were already police waiting outside. There were 5 police cars and more than 10 police officers hiding behind them, pointing their guns at the crowd. Fire! The police outside must have known what was going on inside. Without any intention of persuading them to surrender, they opened fire directly. In the distance, a helicopter flew over, its searchlight shining on the broken wall. Lin Qiaola. He gestured in the direction of the helicopter. Lin Qiaola yawned and stretched. Where are the candies? I'll give them to you when we get back. This fellow was so mischievous. Without candies, chocolates, or desserts, she didn't even want to move. If Renbaqian didn't call out to her, she would probably lie there and sleep until the end of time. I don't even have a reward, and I still have to fight to the death. Lin Qiaola was immediately unhappy. It's the death of others. Hurry up. The machine gun is quite powerful, and it won't be good if my clothes are damaged. Renbaqian really wanted to kick her. Wait until I reach the spirit will level. According to his progress, he would reach the Earth embryo level in 2 years, which was the peak of the Earth will level. After a few more years, he would be able to break through the sky gate. After that, he would reach the spirit will level. He reckoned that Lin Qiaola wouldn't even be an adult then. There might come a day when he would beat her up. He would really hang her up and beat her up. The masked man behind him was called Feng Shuo. He had stayed in the United States for a long time and was also their guide this time. He was stunned when he heard the conversation between the two of them. These people really didn't feel nervous at all. One had to know that this was the United States. Although its gross domestic product had been surpassed by China, it was still the most advanced country in the world in terms of technology. These people were actually so unscrupulous in such a country and didn't feel the slightest bit nervous. No, this couldn't be considered unscrupulous anymore, but rather crazy. I don't know if I can go back alive. Feng Shuo thought to himself. He wasn't afraid of death, but he had to see how he would die. It was really unsettling to be with such a group of lunatics. Just as he was thinking about this, gunshots rang out incessantly. Tai Yan stomped his feet, sending gravel flying in all directions. He crossed a distance of 100 meters and crashed into a police car, immediately sending the police car and the 2 people behind it flying. He was just one person, but it felt as if a heavy truck had crashed into him. To put it more vividly, he was Optimus Prime before his transformation. The long saber in his hand shone coldly in the darkness, and the police cars and the police officers hiding behind were all cut into pieces. This is F1A26, this is F1A26. We have locked onto the target and are ready to attack. Please give the order, the pilot on the helicopter said to the image floating in the air. On the image was a man in a police uniform. Just as he was about to give the order, he suddenly had a shocked expression. Be careful. What? Before the pilot could react, he suddenly felt a chill in his heart. He turned his head and saw a person lying beside him. An Asian girl was looking inside curiously. Seeing him look over, the young lady grinned foolishly, reminding him of a certain species, huskies. The girl's fingernails that were several centimeters long popped out of her fingers. Different from ordinary people's fingernails, the girl's fingernails were concave inwards into a corner, making them even sharper, like the sharp claws of a feline. She drew a circle on the helicopter's outer shell. The titanium alloy shell was like a piece of paper under these sharp claws. With a push and a pull, the girl dragged the terrified pilot down from the helicopter and flung him to the side. A blood-curdling scream was heard from near to far, and it went silent in less than 2 seconds. Lin Qiaola could still hear the sound of the body falling to the ground. After that, she looked left and right, then pounced into the open cabin door. The machine gunner who had just pulled out his pistol did not even have time to aim before he pulled it out while holding onto his bleeding neck. A moment later, Lin Chaola pounced into the darkness, and the helicopters from before were still flying according to their original route. In less than 2 minutes, there were no living people on the 3 helicopters. Only the smell of blood was still spreading in the cabin, and the helicopters without pilots continued flying according to their original route. Calm. Wonderful book house. Chapter 11-18. Feng Shuo watched as Tai Yan turned the police car and the police officer into pork on the chopping board as if he was chopping melons and vegetables. He watched as the girl in the tube-top short skirt plunged into the darkness. After that, the 3 helicopters flew past as if they didn't see them. His heart was filled with shock. However, he still remembered what he was here for. He swallowed his saliva and asked, "Are we going to the Hua residence next?" According to the original plan, everyone planned to go there. However, the flight route was only to Gotham City. Originally, he was going to come out normally and then take a car to Hua Manor. He didn't expect everyone to kill their way out of the airport, no matter what was in front of them. He knew that they were powerful and cruel, but he didn't expect them to be this cruel. Now, even he was a little flustered. With such a huge ruckus here, it would be difficult to hide his whereabouts, let alone go to the Hua residence. Let's go to Manhattan and find a place to rest. I'm a little tired. Rest? Feng Shuo was stunned for a moment before a strange expression appeared on his face. After causing such a huge ruckus here, I'm afraid we'll be intercepted before we get far. They'll probably send out the army. Feng Shuo didn't know much. Even though he had seen everyone's battle prowess, he didn't think they could face the army. This was Citibank's territory, one of the world's economic centers. Even if they escaped the annihilation of the army, they would be quickly found when they reached Manhattan. Perhaps they could cause some casualties to the army and cause some damage to Manhattan, but that was all. After that, they would be captured or killed. After that, he would hide and think of a way to head to the Hua residence. These people might have a chance to be beheaded. Why don't we follow the original plan and go to Hua Manor? Renbachchen thought for a while and patted Feng Shuo's shoulder. Manhattan, lead the way. It was actually quite safe in Manhattan. As the most prosperous district in Gotham City, the United States would not allow them to destroy the place, nor would they dare to drop a nuclear bomb there. They could only send out their army. However, the army in the city posed little threat to Cardinal Heaven experts. This was especially true for high-rise buildings and complicated terrains. Unless they wanted to turn the place into ruins, Tai Yan and the rest could attack as they pleased. In the movie, Manhattan was destroyed countless times, but in real life, it was definitely unbearable for America to fight a war there. After all, the president was just a spokesperson. It could be A.O. Hazy or Baldy Chang. Renbachchen was prepared to fight the United States first. After that, he and the Empress would launch a surprise attack on the Hua residence. With the Empress's speed, it would only take her half an hour to cover 300 kilometers. The other party definitely wouldn't be able to react in time. Unless the President of the United States ran away and went into hiding while they were still in Manhattan. However, a monk could run away, but the temple could not run away. Other than the White House, there was still the Pentagon. This time, Renbachchen was determined to wreak havoc. This is the Pentagon. Connect me to the president. What happened? The current president of Citigroup was called Norman Bird. He had short silver hair and looked to be in his 50s. He was wearing a blue shirt with his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. It seemed like he had not rested yet. Mr. President, I have a piece of news for you. The magician and the woman are not dead, an old man in a suit said. Magician was his code name in the United States. Back in the military base, he was empty-handed, but he always had a spear or a metal chain with him when he fought. "Mr. Minister of Defense, are you joking with me?" Norman was shocked. How could humans survive such an explosion? Furthermore, satellites had already searched the area and found no signs of life. They had also repeatedly compared the satellite images. After the plane exploded, there was absolutely no intact human body that fell. It was impossible for them to be alive. "I also hope that this is a joke, but unfortunately, it's the truth. We are in trouble. Mr. President." Norman's face turned extremely ugly. They were actually still alive after such an explosion, which happened 10,000 meters above the ground. "Where are they?" The Minister of Defense was livid. "John F. Kennedy Airport. They just killed 2 security officers, 17 airport security guards, 22 police officers, and 3 helicopter pilots at John F. Kennedy Airport. They don't have the slightest intention to hide their whereabouts. Their intention is very clear, to kill and destroy." Norman's face changed a few times, and cold sweat began to drip from his forehead. Those 2 people were here for revenge. They were too crazy. The disaster at John F. Kennedy Airport would definitely shock the entire country. However, he couldn't care less at this time. Based on the abilities displayed by the other party, what happened at John F. Kennedy Airport was probably a small matter. As if reading Norman's thoughts, the old man added with an ugly expression, "They aren't just 2 people. They formed an Avengers alliance, and there are a total of 10 of them." Norman slowly sat in his chair, took a deep breath, and asked, "Is there any good news, Mr. Minister of Defense?" "No, there's only worse news." Norman felt that if he could, he would like to change the Minister of Defense. Talking to this old man was really troublesome. "What's worse?" Norman covered his forehead. "They have already started moving north." "Where is their destination?" "It's likely to be a bustling area. Our troops will be restrained there, but they don't need to care about that." The old man had the same opinion. It had to be said that those who could sit in this position were all outstanding people. However, the lack of intelligence and the wrong perception of power made them make the wrong choice. If they knew more, they would probably make the same choice. Some things had to be tried to be known. Norman gritted his teeth and said, "We must stop them and not let them enter densely populated areas." If they really entered densely populated areas, he would be finished. He was very clear about this. The other party definitely wasn't here for a vacation. After saying this, he sat in his chair and panted a few times. He felt as if his chest was being pressed by a huge rock. The news brought by the Minister of Defense was really shocking. The 11th Division of the Army and the 3rd Regiment of the Mechanical Army have already set up a defense nearby. Helicopters are attacking first to delay the other party. Due to time constraints, their defensive area is already close to densely populated areas and is likely to accidentally injure people. In addition, I hope to mobilize the Air Force and Special Forces to coordinate the attack. Okay. Norman responded. The Ministry of Defense was very fast and had already done so before he was notified. This was already beyond his authority, but he didn't care at all. All he could think about now was whether such power could stop the other party. The conclusion seemed a little pessimistic. Gather all the staff. This is a war, and we must win. Newman said solemnly to the Minister of Defense. I'll head to the Pentagon right away. We will do our best, Mr. President. The Minister of Defense didn't say that they would win in the end. His opinion was the same as Norman's. After understanding the outcome of the attack by the Empire of the Unsetting Sun and the explosion, he wondered if the other party would be killed. Norman opened his mouth and really wanted to say, "Is there still a possibility for us to negotiate?" However, he didn't say it out loud. He was starting to regret it now. He regretted his previous actions. Judging from the outcome, the previous action had brought them huge trouble. Calm. Wonderful book house. Chapter 11-19. Let's get out. Renbochin pulled the Empress's hand and got out of the taxi. He was starting to hate these driverless taxis. In the past, no one would dare to stop here. Even if they were threatened with knives and guns, they wouldn't dare to leave everyone here. I reckon they stopped these cars, Feng Shuo said as he got out of the car behind. There are no cars coming from behind. They seem to have been stopped. Renbochin nodded. He understood this. Under the moonlight and streetlights, he could see flying motorcycles flying in the direction of the airport. Flying motorcycles were usually used by the police because they could move quickly in the city, weren't affected by traffic, and were easy to take off and land. On the contrary, the military rarely used them. After all, they could only carry a small number of people, fly a short distance, and most importantly, they were a target in the sky. Without cars, everyone moved very fast, even faster than the cars. When they passed by a viaduct, a beam of light fell on them from the sky. 4 helicopters were divided into 2 directions. They were 500 meters horizontally from the viaduct and more than 100 meters above ground. It was difficult for Lin Chaola to reach this distance. Fire snakes began to spit out from beside the searchlights. Countless bullets intersected to form a bullet net that enveloped everyone. Tai Yan and Wuqing brandished their steel sabers and blocked the bullets from both sides. The sound of clanking rang out incessantly. The Empress's figure flashed and disappeared from everyone's side. She slapped the side of the helicopter with her jade-like palms, and the helicopter spun like a top. Both helicopters faced the crowd sideways. The Empress took a step in the air and appeared at the tail of the second helicopter. She put her hands on the helicopter and twisted it, causing it to spin continuously in the air. Then, the third helicopter, the fourth helicopter. When the Empress returned to her original position, the sound of heavy steel hitting the ground could be heard. Tai Yan glanced at his own steel blade. The snow-white blade was now covered with craters, causing him to feel pain. This saber was his wife's dowry. It could be used as a family heirloom. For the rest of the journey, Tai Yan kept sighing. Renbochin couldn't help but say, "I will give you 10 sabers when we get back. Don't be so distressed. My saber is made of gold and steel." Tai Yan's eyes lit up. "In that case, you should look for Her Majesty." Renbochin almost spat in his face. "In order to serve Your Majesty, I won't even frown even if I have to go bankrupt." Tai Yan immediately chuckled, fully displaying the simplicity and honesty of a mountain person. Renbochin immediately chuckled. This bunch of old bastards looked like they had thick eyebrows and big eyes, but none of them were good people. They're moving too fast. Based on their current speed, they'll reach the area where the original defense line was set up in 5 minutes. Only the 3rd Mechanical Regiment can set up the defense in time. The 11th Army Division won't be able to reach the designated location in time. The Pentagon was brightly lit at this time. Countless people in the offices were busy, and a tense atmosphere spread in the Pentagon. 0-inch how much longer until the 11th Division arrives? The vanguard needs at least 10 minutes. They're too slow. Get someone to think of a way to stall them. The 3rd Mech Regiment still has 6 flying snake helicopters, but it's hard to hold them back with just 1 helicopter. Helicopters and the soldiers of the 3rd Mechanical Regiment, we must stop them outside the line of defense. Doesn't the Gotham City Police Station have flying motorcycles? Could they hold them back? We only need 5 minutes to stall them until the vanguard of the 11th Division arrives to set up the defense line. They've already arrived at the airport and won't be able to return in time. Activate the space-based weapons. Lock onto our defensive area. The target has appeared. Position is 2,000 meters ahead. Get ready to attack. Position is 1,300 meters ahead. Snipers, open fire. One by one, the voices quickly issued orders. At this time, Renbachian and the others could advance about 100 meters per second, which was equivalent to a speed of more than 300 kilometers per hour. The Empress suddenly stretched out her hand in front of Renbachian, and a jet-black bullet fell into her hand. The snipers in the distance couldn't believe their eyes when they saw the scene through the scope. At the same time, Lian Liang carried Feng Shuo and moved slightly to the side. Tai Yan's sword flashed. Gunshots were heard in the distance after they finished their actions. Then, tongues of fire were spat out in the darkness. Hundreds of soldiers wrapped in kinetic skeletons formed a dense crossfire that engulfed everyone. These mechanical soldiers were stronger, carried more ammunition, and didn't need to worry about the recoil of the firearms. Their firepower was several times greater than that of ordinary soldiers. 2 mechanical soldiers could match the firepower of a squad of ordinary soldiers. Needless to say, due to the support system, the accuracy and reaction speed of the mechanical soldiers weren't comparable to ordinary soldiers. In the air, dozens of small missiles were fired from both sides of the helicopters. The Empress grabbed Renbachian and moved as if she were taking a stroll in the air. However, her speed was so fast that the eyes couldn't keep up with her as she pounced toward the armed helicopters in the sky. She swatted one of the helicopters down with a single palm strike. Lin Chaola was originally behind everyone. She squatted down slightly, and her entire body melted into the darkness like a fish in the water. She was completely untraceable. A moment later, a few screams came from the rear of the mechanical army. Lin Chaola had a husky-like smile on her face. Her hands turned into claws and brushed past the bodies of the soldiers like a breeze. A rain of blood and minced meat were set off. Lin Chaola flashed through the crowd and squinted her eyes. She enjoyed the feeling of hunting in the dark. This was an instinct that came from her blood. Ha ha ha, I'll let you guys see how sharp my blade is. Qin Chuan laughed wildly and leaped into the air. The long blade in his hand, which weighed 175 kilograms, drew an arc in the air. The air was torn apart as if it was a piece of cloth, and the blade landed heavily on the mechanical army. The ground seemed to shake. A blade mark appeared on the ground more than 10 meters in front of Qin Chuan. Regardless of whether it was the limbs or the firearms, they were all pushed to the sides. Then, the blade swept across and slashed at the waist. The defensive line formed by hundreds of soldiers equipped with the most advanced mechanical skeletons was instantly broken without any resistance. It's over. In the Pentagon, a staff officer who was looking at the screen turned pale, and the documents in his hands fell to the ground silently. At this moment, he could only see flashes of snow-white light in the crowd, followed by broken limbs and splatters of blood. A sea of blood was set off in the crowd. The originally noisy command room instantly fell into an indescribable silence after Lin Chaola and Qin Chuan broke through the defensive line. One by one, they looked at the images floating in the air with a pale face. It was hard to believe that the strongest army in the world, the mechanical army that they were most proud of, could not resist against 10 enemies. Looking at the other figures killing their way into the defensive line on both sides, a staff officer shouted with a pale face, "Retreat, let them retreat." In fact, there was no need for him to shout. Everyone knew that they had to retreat and form a new defensive line. Fighting with these enemies at such a close distance was suicide, not a battle. However, everything happened too fast. It was so fast that no one could react. In a breath's time, a few killing gods broke through the defensive line. In another breath's time, there were only mutilated corpses left in the middle of the defensive line, and some soldiers who were still alive and struggling on the ground. In the third breath's time, the blade light had already killed its way into the defensive line on both sides. They didn't even have the chance to escape. And the sixth armed helicopter in the air also crashed down at a speed faster than when it rose into the air. The defense minister closed his eyes. As expected, they lost. What was more chilling was the speed of their defeat. It was useless even if the 11th Army Corps arrived. Such firepower couldn't cause any trouble to the enemies. Didn't anyone get hurt from such a powerful firepower net? Someone couldn't help but mumble. Who are they? What are they? Calm. Wonderful book house. Chapter 1120. I would like to personally thank some of the friends who have tipped today. Among them, there are 5 branch masters: Playboy, Kagaya Azuma, Diver Lu, Tachibana already decided, and Zi Xianyuchen. The other 10 people in the top 15, Kaka, Happy Wings, Num, It's Hard to Think of a Name, No Coincidence, Little Kagawa Chuckle, World of Ladders, That's All, Eternity 38, Small Slave, Zukulin. There are still many readers behind me, but I can only see the top 15 on the webpage. I really can't take it anymore today, so I won't be scrolling through my phone. I would like to say thank you to all the friends who have supported me. I'm going to sleep. The pretty boy at the Empress's house would like to thank all the readers who have supported me. Currently typing, please wait for a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.